What if I told you that everything you've heard about the human brain might be a lie? Since childhood, we've been told that humans only use 10% of their brains. It's a statement repeated so often, it feels impossible to challenge. You hear it in movies, books, and even from teachers, making it sound completely believable. But the truth, it's one of the biggest misconceptions of all time. The idea itself is fascinating. What if a massive portion of your brain was just sitting there, unused? What if hidden inside you was untapped intelligence, waiting to be unlocked? People love the thought of limitless potential, and this myth plays right into that fantasy. But believing something doesn't make it real. Neuroscientists have studied the brain for decades, mapping its activity and functions in incredible detail, and what they've found completely disproves this myth. Your brain is constantly active, handling everything from complex thoughts to unconscious functions like breathing and heartbeat regulation. Every part has a purpose, and none of it is sitting idle. So where did this idea even come from? Some say it started in the early 1900s when scientists observed that not all neurons fired at once. That led to a misunderstanding. People assumed that meant most of the brain wasn't being used, when in reality, different parts activate at different times depending on what you're doing. It's like a car engine. It doesn't have to be running at full speed all the time to function properly. Movies and self-help gurus took this flawed idea and ran with it, selling the dream that you could unlock hidden parts of your mind. But the reality? Your brain is already operating at full capacity, just in different ways depending on the situation. Right now, multiple regions of your brain are working together to process what you're hearing and thinking. While you sleep, other areas take over, strengthening memories and repairing cells. When you exercise, your motor cortex becomes more active. When you solve a problem, your frontal lobe lights up. No matter what you're doing, your brain is never sitting still. So if you already use 100% of your brain, why do some people achieve more than others? Why do some come up with groundbreaking ideas while others struggle to focus? The answer isn't about unlocking hidden potential. It's about how you train your brain, how you think, and how you challenge yourself to grow. The 10% myth is comforting because it makes it seem like greatness is locked away, waiting to be discovered. But the real truth, your full potential isn't hidden. It's in the way you use what you already have. So the next time someone tells you we only use 10% of our brains, you'll know better. The real question isn't about what's missing. It's about how you make the most of what's already there. Stop cracking your knuckles. You'll get arthritis. You've probably heard this warning more times than you can count. Teachers repeat it. Even some doctors have warned against it. It sounds believable, right? The loud popping noise, the unnatural movement, it just seems like something that could wear down your joints over time. But here's the truth. That warning is completely false. Cracking your knuckles does not cause arthritis, and science has proven it. First, let's break down what actually happens when you crack your knuckles. That sound is not your bones grinding against each other, and it's not your joints wearing away. It's gas inside your joints. There's a fluid called synovial fluid that helps lubricate movement. When you stretch or pull your fingers, the pressure inside the joint space changes, causing gas bubbles within the fluid to collapse. That sudden collapse is what makes the pop sound. It's the same principle as opening a can of soda. The gas escapes and you hear a noise. It's completely harmless. So if cracking your knuckles doesn't damage the joints, where did this myth come from? It likely started with a misunderstanding of arthritis itself. Arthritis is a condition where the cartilage in your joints breaks down over time, leading to pain, stiffness, swelling. Since arthritis affects the joints, people assumed that any habit involving joint movement, especially something as dramatic sounding as knuckle cracking, must contribute to it. But that assumption was never backed by science. In fact, studies have thoroughly debunked this myth. One of the most famous cases involved a doctor named Donald Enger, who cracked the knuckles of only one hand for 60 years while leaving the other untouched. After 6 decades of comparison, both hands were perfectly fine, no arthritis, no noticeable differences. Larger studies have also examined thousands of people who crack their knuckles regularly, and not a single one has found an increased risk of arthritis. The worst thing knuckle cracking might cause? Temporary swelling or a slight decrease in grip strength right after cracking, but even that isn't permanent. So if it doesn't cause arthritis, why do people still believe it does? A big part of it is psychological. The loud pop of knuckle cracking makes people uncomfortable. It sounds painful, so our brains associate it with damage. Add to that the fact that arthritis is a common condition, and it's easy to blame bad habits for it. But the real causes of arthritis are far more complex. Age, genetics, injuries, and diseases, not simple repetitive actions like cracking knuckles. So should you stop cracking your knuckles? That depends. If you like doing it, there's no harm. If it annoys the people around you, maybe ease up a little. But if anyone tells you it's going to give you arthritis, now you know the truth. The only real consequence, the judgmental looks you'll get from people who still believe the myth. You shave your hair, and when it grows back, it feels thicker, darker, and coarser. It's proof, right? Shaving makes your hair grow back thicker. That's what people have been saying for decades. Parents warn teenagers about it. People hesitate before shaving their arms or legs, afraid they'll make things worse. But is this actually true? Does shaving change the way your hair grows? The truth is, it doesn't. This is one of the most persistent myths in personal grooming, and science has debunked it over and over again. To understand why, we need to break down how hair actually grows. Hair doesn't grow from the surface of your skin. It grows from hair follicles beneath it. Each strand pushes through the skin and continues growing until it either falls out or is cut. When you shave, you're only cutting the hair at the surface. You're not affecting the follicle itself, which is where hair thickness, color, and texture are determined. That means shaving can't possibly alter how your hair grows. So why does it seem like your hair comes back thicker? The answer is simple: blunt ends. When a hair naturally falls out and regrows, it starts with a soft, tapered tip, making it feel finer. But when you shave, you're cutting the hair at its thickest point, leaving behind a blunt edge. When that hair grows back, the blunt tip makes it feel stiffer and more noticeable, especially in areas like your face or legs. But that's just an illusion. The hair itself hasn't changed. It just feels different because the natural taper is gone. Studies have proven this again and again. And again. One of the earliest studies, published in 1928, had participants shave different parts of their bodies and carefully measure the regrowth. The result? No increase in thickness, no change in color. More recent studies have confirmed the same thing. Shaving has absolutely no effect on how hair grows back, yet the myth refuses to die. Why? Because perception is powerful. When hair regrows after shaving, it all comes back at once, creating the illusion of thickness. Plus, since stubbly hair feels rougher, people assume it must be thicker. But if you let the hair grow out fully, it returns to its natural texture and shape. The only way to actually change your hair's thickness or growth rate is through things like hormones, genetics, or medical treatments, not shaving. So, if you're worried about shaving making your hair grow back thicker, you can relax. The only real change is how it feels when it first comes in. If anything, the biggest problem with shaving isn't thickness, it's ingrown hairs and irritation from dull razors. So, if you want smooth skin, just focus on a good shaving routine. And the next time someone warns you about making your hair worse by shaving, you'll know the truth. The only thing shaving changes, how you perceive it. You've seen the diagram, a tongue neatly divided into sections. Sweet at the tip, bitter at the back, sour and salty on the sides. Maybe you were even taught this in school. It's a simple, logical idea. The tongue is divided into taste zones, each responsible for detecting only one type of flavor. But here's the truth. This is completely false. Your tongue doesn't work that way. The idea of taste zones is one of the most persistent scientific myths still being repeated today. Where did this myth come from? It can be traced back to a 1901 paper by a German scientist named David. He was studying how sensitive different parts of the tongue were to taste. But here's the key. He never claimed that tastes were exclusive to certain areas. He simply noted that some parts of the tongue were slightly more sensitive to certain flavors. His research was later misinterpreted, simplified into a neat little diagram, and before long, the tongue map made its way into textbooks, schools, and even medical literature. In reality, your entire tongue can detect all 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Taste buds are not confined to specific areas. They are spread throughout the tongue, as well as on the roof of your mouth, and even in your throat. If taste zones were real, you wouldn't be able to taste sugar at the back of your tongue or bitterness at the tip. But you can. The real reason certain flavors might feel stronger in some areas, it has nothing to do with exclusive zones. It's simply due to variations in sensitivity. Modern research has confirmed this. Each taste bud contains multiple receptor cells, meaning they can detect all flavors, not just one. The reason some flavors might feel stronger in certain spots isn't because of strict zones, but because some areas of the tongue have more nerve endings. That's why spicy foods burn more at the tip, and why sour flavors can make your whole mouth water instantly. So why do people still believe this? One reason is how easy it is to visualize. A simple, colorful diagram is easier to remember than the complex reality of how taste perception actually works. Another reason? Repetition. It's been printed in so many books and taught for so long that even some educators and professionals still believe it. But taste is far more complicated than a simple map. It's influenced by temperature, smell, genetics, and even memory. That's why food tastes bland when you have a cold. Around 80% of what we perceive as taste actually comes from smell. Your brain combines multiple senses to create what you think of as flavor. And then there's umami, the so-called fifth taste, discovered much later. It's the savory, rich taste found in foods like meat, cheese, and mushrooms. If the tongue were really divided into strict zones, where would umami even fit? The fact that it doesn't have a dedicated spot on the so-called taste map is just more proof that the whole idea is wrong. So the next time someone tells you that you can only taste sweet at the tip of your tongue, test it. Place a bit of sugar or salt anywhere, front, back, side. It won't make a difference. Your taste buds aren't divided into separate zones. They're working together everywhere. And just like that, another school-taught myth crumbles. You've seen it happen. A kid eats a candy bar down to sugary drink, and suddenly they're bouncing off the walls, running, yelling, unable to sit still. It seems obvious. Sugar makes kids hyperactive. Parents swear by it. Teachers complain about it. It's such a widespread belief that even doctors used to warn against giving kids too much sugar. But here's the truth. It's a myth. Sugar doesn't cause hyperactivity. Not even a little. This belief comes from a misunderstanding of how sugar affects the body. Yes, sugar provides energy. It's quickly absorbed into the bloodstream, causing a rise in blood sugar levels. But does that translate to hyperactive behavior? Multiple studies say no. Researchers have tested this myth repeatedly, and time after time the results are the same. Sugar has no effect on children's behavior. One of the most well-known studies was conducted in 1994 by the Journal of the American Medical Association. Parents were asked to observe their children after consuming sugar, but there was a catch. Some kids were given real sugar, while others received a placebo, something that tasted sweet but contained no sugar at all. The result? No difference in behavior. Little fun to more hyperactive than those who didn't. So, if sugar doesn't actually make kids hyper, why does it seem like it does? The answer lies in expectations and environment. When parents believe their child has had sugar, they tend to perceive them as being more energetic, even when they haven't consumed any at all. This is called the placebo effect. Then there's the context. When do kids usually eat sugar? Birthday parties, holidays, special occasions. These are already exciting events where children are naturally more energetic. It's not the sugar causing the hyperactivity, it's the excitement of the moment. But what about the so-called sugar rush? When sugar enters the bloodstream, it does cause a brief spike in blood sugar levels, but this doesn't translate into hyperactivity. Instead, the body releases insulin to bring those levels back down, which can actually lead to a crash, making kids feel tired and sluggish. So, does this mean sugar is harmless? Not exactly. While it won't make kids hyper, it can have other negative effects. Too much sugar contributes to obesity, tooth decay, and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. It also affects mood, not by making kids hyper, but by causing fluctuations in energy levels. Another concern is how sugar affects the brain. While it doesn't cause hyperactivity, it does stimulate dopamine, the chemical responsible for pleasure and reward. This is why sugar can feel addictive. It creates a short-term sense of enjoyment, making kids and adults crave more. So, what's the takeaway? If a child is running wild after eating sugar, it's not the sugar making them hyper. It's expectation, excitement, and environment. The real effects of sugar are more subtle. Energy spikes, crashes, and cravings, not uncontrollable hyperactivity. But because this myth is so ingrained in society, parents will likely keep blaming sugar for their child's energy bursts. Even though science has already proven sugar rushes simply don't exist. You drop a piece of food on the floor, instinct kicks in, 5-second rule. You grab it, dust it off, and eat it, because supposedly if you pick it up fast enough, it's still safe. It's a comforting thought, but is it actually true? The idea behind the 5-second rule is simple. Germs don't have time to contaminate food if it's picked up quickly. But the truth? Bacteria don't wait. The moment food touches the floor, it starts picking up microbes. Not in 5 seconds, not in 2, instantly. Scientists have tested this. A study from Rutgers University placed different types of food, bread, watermelon, candy, on various surfaces for different time intervals. The result? Bacteria transferred in less than a second. Even food left for just 1 second had germs on it. The longer it stayed, the more bacteria it picked up, but there was no magical safe window. Another study from Clemson University tested bacteria-covered floors. They found that Salmonella could survive for weeks and instantly contaminate food the moment it touched the surface. That means even if a floor looks clean, it could still be covered in microscopic bacteria you can't see. Some believe the 5-second rule traces back to Genghis Khan, who supposedly declared that food could stay on the ground as long as it was good enough for the ruler. But in reality, this rule isn't based on science, it's based on wishful thinking. Yet, despite the evidence, people still follow it. That's because the 5-second rule plays into something deeper. Our reluctance to waste food. Throwing away food that looks fine and feels unnecessary, so we convince ourselves it's safe. But does this mean you should never eat food off the floor? Not necessarily. The real danger depends on two things: what kind of bacteria is present and what kind of food you dropped. A dry cracker on a clean kitchen tile? Probably fine. A slice of watermelon on a public restroom floor? Definitely not. Moist foods pick up bacteria faster than dry ones, and some surfaces, like carpets, transfer fewer bacteria than hard floors. But the risk is always there. And then there's the question of your immune system. Most of the time, your body can handle small amounts of bacteria. But if you drop food in an area with harmful bacteria like E. coli, or Salmonella, even a tiny amount can make you sick. And you can't see or smell those bacteria. The problem isn't just that food picks up germs, it's that you have no way of knowing which ones are present. That's why doctors and microbiologists say the safest choice is to assume contamination and avoid the risk. So, is the 5-second rule real? Well, no. The moment food touches the ground, it starts picking up germs. But does that mean you'll always get sick? Not necessarily. It depends on where, what, and how much bacteria are present. Still, if you're in doubt, it's always safer to just throw it away. Because the truth is, bacteria don't check their watches. They don't wait 5 seconds. They don't wait at all. People say it all the time, bats are blind. It's so common that no one even questions it. But what if that's completely wrong? What if bats don't just see, but in some ways, see even better than humans? The truth is, bats can see. In fact, their vision is much better than most people realize. While it's true that many species use echolocation to navigate in the dark, that doesn't mean they're blind. It just means they have an extra tool. Their eyes are highly adapted to low light, allowing them to see in conditions where humans would be completely helpless. Some bats can even detect ultraviolet light, something our eyes will never be able to do. So where did this myth come from? It likely started because people noticed bats flying effortlessly at night. Since humans struggle to see in the dark, it was assumed that bats must be completely blind and relying only on sound. But that's far from the truth. Their eyes might be small, but they're powerful. In fact, fruit bats, also known as flying foxes, rely almost entirely on their vision rather than echolocation. They use their sharp eyesight to locate food, recognize landscapes, and even see in color. But the biggest reason this myth stuck, echolocation is so advanced that it seems almost like magic. Bats send out high-pitched sounds that bounce off objects, creating a detailed mental map of their surroundings. They can detect obstacles, moving prey, and even tiny differences in texture, all without needing any light at all. It's so precise that a bat can track something as small as a mosquito in total darkness. Humans can't even come close to replicating that level of perception. And yet, even with echolocation, vision is still essential. Studies show that when bats fly in familiar areas, they rely on their eyesight more than sound. They use their memory and vision to navigate efficiently, only switching to echolocation when necessary. Some species even hunt using vision alone. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Some bats have night vision that's superior to humans. Their eyes are packed with special cells that allow them to process tiny amounts of light, giving them an advantage in darkness. Some even have adaptations that let them see motion better than we can. While we see the night as a blurry void, bats see a world of shadows, movement, and depth. The misconception that bats are blind isn't just wrong, it underestimates how remarkable they really are. These creatures have evolved to dominate the night in ways we can't even comprehend. Not only can they fly with precision in total darkness, but they do it using a combination of senses that are far beyond our capabilities. So the next time someone says a blind as a bat, you'll know the truth. Not only can bats see, but some have vision that surpasses ours in ways we can't imagine. They don't just survive in darkness, they own it. Chameleons are famous for their color-changing abilities, and most people believe they do it to blend into their surroundings. But that's not true. The idea that chameleons shift colors for camouflage is one of the biggest myths in nature. In reality, their color changes have little to do with hiding and everything to do with communication, mood, and even body temperature. Unlike what cartoons and movies show, chameleons don't instantly match their surroundings like a living invisibility cloak. Their skin contains specialized cells called iridophores, which have microscopic crystals that reflect light. By adjusting the spacing of these crystals, chameleons manipulate how light interacts with their skin, allowing them to shift between shades of green, yellow, orange, red, and even blue. But here's the truth. These color changes are mainly signals, not disguises. For chameleons, color is a language. Bright, vivid colors often signal aggression. A male that turns vibrant is either asserting dominance or warning a rival to back off. If another male approaches, the colors intensify in a dramatic display. If neither backs down, a fight happens. On the other hand, a duller shade can indicate stress or submission, signaling that the chameleon is not looking for conflict. Color shifts also play a huge role in attracting mates. During mating season, females display specific colors to communicate whether they're interested or not. If she's receptive, she might glow with inviting hues. But if she's not, her colors darken as a clear warning for males to stay away. This visual language helps chameleons avoid unnecessary conflicts and wasted energy. Another reason they change colors is to regulate body temperature. Chameleons are cold-blooded, which means they rely on external heat sources. When they need warmth, they turn darker to absorb more heat from sunlight. When they get too hot, they switch to lighter shades to reflect sunlight and stay cool. It's a built-in temperature control system that helps them survive in different environments. But does camouflage play no role at all? Not exactly. While blending in isn't the primary function of color change, some species do use slight adjustments to match their surroundings. Instead of dramatic transformations, they make subtle shifts that help them blend with leaves, bark, or branches, making them harder for predators to spot. However, their natural greenish color already provides good camouflage, so extreme color changes for hiding aren't necessary. The myth that chameleons change colour purely for camouflage likely comes from exaggerated portrayals in media. Over time, it became one of those facts that people just assumed to be true. But the truth is far more fascinating. Their colour changes are a complex system of communication, a way to control body temperature, and, in some cases, a minor survival strategy. So the next time you see a chameleon shifting colours, know that it's not trying to disappear. It's expressing itself in a way that only other chameleons truly understand. The Great Wall of China is often said to be the only man-made structure visible from space. This is a fact that almost everyone has heard. But here's the truth. It's completely false. The idea that astronauts can easily see the Great Wall with the naked eye has been repeated so often that it feels undeniable. But in reality, astronauts who have actually been to space have repeatedly debunked this claim. The Great Wall is incredibly long, stretching over 13,000 miles, but it's also narrow, averaging only about 30 feet wide. From low Earth orbit, which is where the International Space Station orbits at around 250 miles above Earth, spotting the Great Wall is nearly impossible without aid. The problem isn't its length, it's the fact that it blends in with the natural landscape. The wall is built from stone, wood, and earth, materials that match the colours of the surrounding environment. Unlike bright city lights or massive airports, which stand out against the darkness, the Great Wall is nearly indistinguishable from the land around it. Astronauts who have attempted to see the Great Wall with their bare eyes have struggled. Even with perfect conditions, it's barely noticeable, and some have admitted they couldn't find it at all. In fact, NASA has stated that many other human-made structures like roads, bridges, airports, and even large agricultural fields are much easier to see from space than the Great Wall. When the wall has been captured from orbit, it was only with the help of high-powered cameras, zoom lenses, or perfect lighting conditions, none of which count as seeing it with the naked eye. So where did this myth come from? Some historians trace it back to the 18th century, when a British antiquarian claimed that the wall could be seen from the moon. This was long before humans even made it to space, so there was no way to verify it. The myth stuck, and by the time astronauts actually started orbiting Earth, the idea was already deeply ingrained. Even textbooks repeated it, making it one of those facts that no one questioned. But if the Great Wall isn't visible from space, what is? At night, city lights form glowing clusters that outline human civilization. Large airports and major roads can stand out, as well as artificial islands and vast farming projects. But a narrow, earth-coloured wall blending into a rugged landscape? Not so much. The Great Wall of China is an architectural wonder, an incredible achievement in human history, but its visibility from space is nothing more than a persistent myth. If you were an astronaut floating above Earth, you'd be far more likely to spot a bright highway than this legendary structure. Goldfish are often said to have a memory span of just 3 seconds. It's one of those facts that almost everyone has heard. People use it to joke about forgetfulness, assuming these little fish live in a constant loop of rediscovering their surroundings. But this claim is completely false. Goldfish actually have impressive memories that last for months, not seconds. Scientists have tested this over and over, training goldfish to recognize sounds, colors, and even objects. And the results are shocking. These fish not only remember, but can also associate certain cues with rewards. In one experiment, researchers played a specific sound every time they fed a group of goldfish. Then they stopped playing the sound for months. But when they played it again, the fish instantly swam to their feeding spot, expecting food. That's not something an animal with a 3-second memory could do. Goldfish are also capable of problem solving. In another study, they were trained to navigate mazes just like lab rats. Instead of aimlessly swimming, they remembered which paths led to rewards and avoided dead ends. This proves they can retain information and use it to make decisions over time. But how did this myth start? The truth is, it likely comes from underestimating fish intelligence. Watching a goldfish in a tiny bowl, constantly swimming in circles, makes it easy to assume they have no memory. But that's not because they forget. It's because they have nothing new to interact with. In a well-designed environment with decorations, plants and companions, goldfish remember their surroundings. They recognize their owners and even respond to their names if trained properly. Yes, goldfish can be trained just like dogs. They learn to perform tricks, press buttons for food, and even swim through hoops on command. Their memory isn't just about food either. Goldfish can remember other fish and even show signs of recognizing familiar humans. They learn routines, know when it's feeding time, and react differently to different people. If you always feed your goldfish, it might swim toward you when you enter the room. But if a stranger approaches, no reaction. The idea that goldfish have no memory has led to some pretty poor care. People assume they don't need much space or stimulation, but in reality, goldfish get bored. In small empty tanks, they become less active, showing signs of stress. Given the right environment, they thrive. So no, a goldfish won't forget everything after 3 seconds. It won't be shocked every time it sees its tank decorations. And it definitely won't fail to recognize the person who feeds it every day. Their memories last far longer than most people assume. If anything, goldfish might remember you better than you remember them. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. It's a phrase people love to repeat, a way to reassure themselves that rare events won't happen again. But when it comes to actual lightning, this statement is completely false. Not only can lightning strike the same place twice, but it often does, and sometimes within seconds. Lightning isn't random. It follows the path of least resistance, meaning if something was struck once, it's more likely to be struck again. The best example, the Empire State Building. This iconic New York skyscraper is hit by lightning around 20 to 25 times a year. It's one of the tallest buildings in the city, standing high above the surrounding structures. Its height and metal framework make it a perfect lightning target. And it's not alone. Other tall buildings, radio towers, and even trees get struck repeatedly. During thunderstorms, lightning seeks out the shortest path between the clouds and the ground. Tall structures act like magnets, drawing in electrical charges. In some cases, a single thunderstorm can produce multiple strikes in the same location within minutes. This happens because, once a channel is formed between the sky and the ground, it remains the easiest path for electricity to travel. And it's not just buildings. People can be struck more than once too. Roy Sullivan, a park ranger from Virginia, holds the world record for surviving the most lightning strikes. 7 in total. He was hit over the course of 35 years, suffering burns, hair loss, and other injuries. His case proves that lightning doesn't care whether it has struck before. If conditions are right, it will strike again. Another common misconception is that lightning only strikes open areas. While it's true that standing in a field during a thunderstorm is dangerous, lightning is just as likely to hit a city, a forest, or even water. It follows electrical conductivity, meaning metal, moisture, and tall objects are all prime targets. That's why airplanes, despite flying high above the ground, are struck by lightning regularly. Fortunately, they're built to withstand it. So where did this myth come from? The phrase probably originated as a metaphor rather than a scientific fact. People use it to mean that bad luck won't repeat itself. but nature doesn't follow human beliefs. If conditions remain the same results can and will happen again. The best way to stay safe in a storm is to take shelter indoors. Avoid standing under trees near metal poles or in open fields. If you're caught outside, crouch low to minimize contact with the ground. And never assume that just because lightning has struck nearby, you're safe. If anything, it means that location is more vulnerable to another strike. So next time someone tells you lightning never strikes the same place twice, remember, nature doesn't follow catchy phrases. It follows science. Water conducts electricity. That's what we've always been told. It's the reason we're warned to never mix electrical appliances with water, and why movies show dramatic electrocutions when a hairdryer falls into a bathtub. But the reality is, water itself doesn't actually conduct electricity. What does? The impurities inside it. If you took a glass of 100% pure water, no minerals, no dissolved salts, just H2O, and tried to pass an electric current through it, nothing would happen. Pure water doesn't have free-floating charged particles, which are necessary for conducting electricity. Without them, there's no way for the current to move. That means, if you somehow managed to swim in a pool of completely purified water and a live wire fell in, you wouldn't get electrocuted. But here's the catch. Pure water is extremely rare outside of a lab. Almost every source of water we come into contact with, tap water, lakes, oceans, and even rainwater, contains impurities, and those impurities change everything. When minerals and salts dissolve in water, they release charged particles called ions. These ions act as tiny bridges, allowing electricity to travel through the water. That's why salt water is a far better conductor than fresh water. The ocean, packed with dissolved salt, is one of the best natural electrical conductors on Earth. On the other hand, distilled water, which has had all its impurities removed, is a terrible conductor. This myth likely comes from the fact that most people have never interacted with truly pure water. The water we drink and use every day is full of dissolved substances. Even small amounts of salt, dirt, or minerals are enough to allow electricity to pass through. That's why stepping into a puddle with a downed power line nearby is dangerous. It's not the water itself that's conducting the electricity, but the impurities inside it. This also explains why electrical safety guidelines exist around water. It's not because water has some special ability to carry electricity, but because it almost always contains conductive materials. That's why swimming during a thunderstorm is a terrible idea. If lightning strikes the water, the electrical current spreads rapidly because of the dissolved minerals, making the entire area deadly. Understanding this also helps explain why different types of water conduct electricity at different rates. Plain water filled with salt is a much better conductor than fresh water. Even within freshwater sources, conductivity varies. Mountain streams with fewer dissolved minerals are less conductive than lakes or rivers that have picked up minerals from rocks and soil. But just because water isn't a conductor doesn't mean you should ever take chances. Unless you're in a controlled laboratory setting, you can never guarantee that the water around you is complete of impurities. Even trace amounts of minerals can turn a harmless-looking puddle into a deadly conductor. So, does water conduct electricity? The truth is, not by itself. Pure H2O won't shock you, but in the real world, water is rarely pure. And when it's filled with even the tiniest amount of minerals or salts, it becomes a dangerous conductor. That's why the warning still holds: never mix electricity with water. Diamonds are rare. Diamonds are valuable. That's what we've been told. That's why engagement rings are expected to feature a sparkling diamond, why Hollywood flaunts them as symbols of status, and why they're marketed as the ultimate expression of love. But what if everything you've been led to believe about diamonds is a carefully crafted illusion? The truth is, diamonds aren't rare at all. In fact, they're one of the most common gemstones on Earth. Deep within the Earth's mantle, carbon is subjected to extreme heat and pressure, forming diamonds over millions of years. But natural diamonds aren't scarce. What's scarce is the perception that's been built up. The reason diamonds seem rare has nothing to do with nature and everything to do with business. In the late 1800s, massive diamond deposits were discovered in South Africa. This should have been good news for consumers. More supply means lower prices, right? But a group of powerful investors saw an opportunity. They formed a company called De Beers, which quickly took control of the global diamond supply. Instead of letting diamonds flood the market, they carefully limited how many were released, creating an artificial shortage. This made diamonds appear far rarer than they actually were, driving up demand and prices. Then came the marketing. In 1947, De Beers launched one of the most successful advertising campaigns in history, coining the phrase, "A diamond is forever." The message was clear. Diamonds weren't just pretty stones, they were essential. Every engagement ring needed one. Every love story required it. And just like that, a cultural tradition was born, not because of history or necessity, but because of marketing. But if diamonds aren't actually rare, are they at least valuable? Not really. Unlike gold, which holds its value due to its industrial uses and scarcity, diamonds have no real resale market. The moment you buy a diamond, its value plummets. Try selling one, and you'll quickly realize jewelers will only offer a fraction of what you paid. The price isn't based on actual rarity or intrinsic worth. It's based on perception. Even more shocking, diamonds aren't even the rarest or most valuable gemstones. Stones like sapphires, emeralds, and rubies are actually much harder to find, yet they don't carry the same cultural weight because they were never marketed the way diamonds were. And now, lab-grown diamonds are proving just how artificial the whole system is. These synthetic diamonds are chemically identical to natural ones but cost a fraction of the price. If diamonds were truly rare, this wouldn't be possible. So why do people still believe diamonds are rare and valuable? Because the illusion is carefully maintained. Diamond companies still control supply. Advertisements still push the idea that diamonds equal love. The tradition has become so ingrained that questioning it feels almost unthinkable. But the reality is simple. Diamonds aren't rare. Their high price isn't a reflection of scarcity, but of one of the most successful marketing strategies in history. And the next time someone tells you a diamond is forever, remember, so is the myth. Vikings. The name alone brings to mind fierce warriors, longships cutting through icy waters, and of course, horned helmets. It's an image that's been reinforced by centuries of paintings, movies, and even football team mascots. But what if the most Viking symbol, the horned helmet, was nothing more than a myth? The truth is, there's no historical evidence that Vikings ever wore helmets with horns. Not in battle. Not in raids, not even as ceremonial gear. In fact, every Viking helmet ever discovered has been simple, rounded, and completely hornless. The only reason we associate them with horns is because of artistic imagination, not historical fact. So where did this myth come from? It all started in the 19th century, long after the Viking Age had ended. At the time, Romanticism was sweeping through Europe and people were obsessed with ancient civilizations. Writers, painters, and opera composers wanted to depict Vikings as larger-than-life warriors, and nothing says intimidating like a helmet with giant horns. One of the biggest culprits was Richard Wagner, the German composer whose operas featured Viking-like warriors with elaborate horned helmets. His influence shaped pop culture, and soon the image spread. The real Vikings, they were practical. They valued function over decoration. A horned helmet in battle would have been a terrible idea. Imagine fighting with something that could be easily grabbed and knocked off, or thrown off balance. In real combat, Vikings needed to move fast, swing weapons freely, and avoid giving their enemies anything to grab onto. A simple iron helmet, if they had one at all, was the logical choice. Most Viking warriors didn't even wear helmets. Iron was expensive, and full helmets were rare. Many relied on chainmail, leather armor, or even just a thick wool tunic for protection. The few helmets that have been found, like the Gegermanbu helmet, are round, sturdy, and completely horn-free. But if Vikings never wore horned helmets, where did the idea of horned warrior gear come from? The answer lies even further back in history. Ancient cultures like the Celts and Bronze Age Germanic tribes did have ceremonial helmets with horns, wings, and animal decorations. These weren't used in battle, but in religious or ritual settings. Some historians believe that artists in the 1800s confused these ancient artifacts with Viking history, merging the two into a single, dramatic image. Even Hollywood has helped keep the myth alive. Movies, TV shows, and cartoons continue to show Vikings with oversized horned helmets, reinforcing the idea for new generations. But the next time you see one, remember, it's about as historically accurate as a knight in shining armor wearing sunglasses. Vikings were fearsome warriors. They were expert sailors. They left a lasting impact on history. But the one thing they never did, strap horns to their helmets and charge into battle. That part was pure fiction. Columbus, the man credited with discovering America. It's a story told in schools for generations. The brave explorer who set sail in 1492 and found a new world. But what if that story wasn't entirely true? What if Columbus wasn't the first, and what he discovered wasn't even new? The truth is, Columbus never set foot on what we now call the United States. His 4 voyages took him to islands in the Caribbean. Bahamas, Cuba, and Hispaniola. And even if he had, he wouldn't have been the first outsider to do so. Long before Columbus, the Americas were already inhabited. Millions of indigenous people have been living there for thousands of years, building civilizations, developing agriculture, and creating vast trade networks. The idea that Columbus had discovered a land that was already thriving ignores an entire history that existed long before him. But even if we're only talking about Europeans, Columbus still wasn't the first. Around 500 years earlier, Norse explorer Leif Erikson and his crew reached North America, landing in what is now Canada. Archaeological evidence from Lantosa and meadows in Newfoundland confirms that Vikings built settlements there around the year 1000. They didn't stay long, but their journey across the Atlantic proves that Columbus wasn't the first European to reach the continent. So why does Columbus get the credit? The answer lies in the impact of his voyages. While the Vikings came and went without leaving a lasting mark, Columbus's expeditions changed the course of history. His journeys led to European colonization, the widespread exchange of goods, and the eventual rise of the modern America. His arrival sparked what's now called the Columbian Exchange, an enormous transfer of plants, animals, cultures, and unfortunately, diseases between the old world and the new. But there's a darker side to the story. Columbus's arrival also marked the beginning of centuries of colonization, exploitation, and suffering for indigenous peoples. His men enslaved and mistreated the local populations, taking land and resources by force. His legacy isn't just one of exploration, it's also one of destruction. later. Over time, the myth of Columbus grew, especially in the United States. By the 18th and 19th centuries, he was celebrated as a hero, a symbol of discovery and perseverance. In 1937, Columbus Day became a national holiday, reinforcing the idea that he was the man who discovered America. But as more people have learned the true history, many now question whether he should be honored in the same way. Columbus changed the world, but he didn't find an empty land. He didn't reach the US. He wasn't even the first European to cross the Atlantic. The truth is, America was never discovered in 1492. It had been there all along. Einstein, the genius who redefined physics, the man behind the theory of relativity, often portrayed as the ultimate symbol of intelligence. And yet there's a popular myth that he once failed. It's a kind of story that gives hope. If even Einstein struggled in school, maybe failure isn't such a big deal. But here's the truth. Einstein never actually failed math. In fact, he was ahead of his peers from a young age. It likely started with a misunderstanding. In 1935, a newspaper claimed Einstein had failed math as a student. When he heard about it, Einstein himself laughed and said, "Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." Not exactly the words of someone who struggled with numbers. The reality is, Einstein was a gifted student, especially in mathematics and physics. By the time he was 12, he was teaching himself advanced algebra and Euclidean geometry. By 14, he had moved on to calculus. He wasn't just passing, he was excelling. But that doesn't mean his academic journey was perfect. Einstein did have some struggles in school, but they had nothing to do with math. He disliked the rigid, authoritarian teaching style of his early education in Germany. He often clashed with teachers who saw his independent thinking as a lack of discipline. One teacher even told him he would never amount to anything. Later, when he applied to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, he actually failed the entrance exam, but not because of maths. His scores in physics and math were excellent. The problem was other subjects, like language and history, where he didn't perform as well. He had to spend a year at a different school before reapplying and getting accepted. So, why does this myth persist? Partly because people love the idea that even the greatest minds faced obstacles. The thought that Einstein failed math makes him seem more relatable, more human. It's a comforting idea. Maybe failure isn't so bad. But the truth is, Einstein's struggles were never about his intelligence. They were about fitting into a system that didn't always reward creativity and independent thinking. This story also reveals something deeper about how we define success. Einstein wasn't a traditional student. He didn't memorize facts just to pass tests. He thought in concepts, questioned everything, and often learned on his own. His success wasn't about following the rules, it was about breaking them when necessary. So no, Einstein didn't fail math. But he did prove something far more important. Intelligence isn't just about grades. It's about curiosity, persistence, and the willingness to think differently. Napoleon Bonaparte, a name that echoes through history, tied to military genius, political ambition, and one of the most persistent myths of all time, that he was short. The image of a tiny, power-hungry ruler compensating for his height has been repeated for centuries. But here's the truth. Napoleon wasn't actually short. In fact, for his time, he was about average height. The myth likely began with a simple misunderstanding. When Napoleon died in 1821, his height was recorded as 5 feet 2 inches. But there was a catch. This measurement was in French feet, not the English system. French feet were longer, and when converted into modern measurements, Napoleon was actually about 5 feet 6 inches tall. That might not seem impressive by today's standards, but at the time it was completely normal. In fact, he was just slightly below the height of the average Frenchman. So why do we still believe he was short? A big reason is British propaganda. During the Napoleonic Wars, Britain saw Napoleon as their greatest enemy, and mocking him was a way to weaken his image. British political cartoons exaggerated his size, depicting him as a tiny, angry man standing next to taller generals. The goal was to make him look ridiculous, like a child playing at war. These depictions stuck, and over time, people stopped questioning whether they were actually true. But there's another reason this myth survived, the so-called Napoleon complex. This psychological theory suggests that shorter men tend to overcompensate for their height by being more aggressive and ambitious. While the idea has been debated, it reinforced the belief that Napoleon's hunger for power came from his supposed lack of stature. The idea of a small man trying to prove himself on the world stage fit the narrative people wanted to believe. Ironically, Napoleon himself may have contributed to the illusion. He often surrounded himself with the soldiers of his imperial guard, many of whom were much taller than average. Next to them, he probably did look small. But among the general population, he was completely unremarkable in size. Despite the truth being well documented, the myth refuses to die. It's been repeated in history books, films, and even everyday conversations. The phrase Napoleon complex remains widely used, even though it's based on an inaccurate idea. The reality is that Napoleon didn't need to compensate for anything. His ambition, intelligence, and military strategy made him one of the most influential leaders in history. So no, Napoleon wasn't a towering giant, but he also wasn't the tiny dictator people love to imagine. He was an average height man who reshaped Europe through sheer force of will. His legacy has nothing to do with his stature, but rather his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his enemies. And in the end, it wasn't his height that made him powerful, it was his mind. Humans evolved from monkeys, that's what many people believe, but it's not exactly true. The idea that humans came directly from monkeys is an oversimplification of evolution. It makes it sound like one day a monkey just gave birth to a human, but that's not how evolution works. The truth is far more complex and far more fascinating. Humans and modern monkeys share a common ancestor. This means that millions of years ago there was an ancient primate species that eventually gave rise to both monkeys and humans. But over time, evolution took us in different directions. Some of our primate relatives adapted to life in trees, evolving into modern monkeys. Others moved in a different direction, eventually leading to early humans. So why do people think we evolved directly from monkeys? It likely comes from the way evolution is sometimes explained. People see charts that show a monkey slowly turning into a human, like a straight line of progress. But evolution isn't a straight path, it's more like a branching tree. Monkeys and humans are like distant cousins who share a great-great-grandparent, rather than one being a direct descendant of the other. One of the biggest misunderstandings comes from the term ape versus monkey. Monkeys have tails, while apes, like gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans, do not. Humans didn't evolve from monkeys, but we did evolve from an ancient ape species. Our closest living relatives today are chimpanzees and bonobos, and we share about 98-99% of our DNA with them. That doesn't mean humans came from chimps. It just means we both descended from a shared ancestor millions of years ago. So what did that ancestor look like? It wasn't a monkey and it wasn't a human either. It was a primate species that lived around 6 to 7 million years ago. Over time, some of its descendants evolved traits that made them more suited for walking on two legs. These early human ancestors, known as hominins, continued evolving, developing bigger brains, more complex social structures, and eventually the ability to create tools, art, and language. The process took millions of years, with many different human-like species emerging along the way. Some, like Neanderthals, lived alongside early Homo sapiens before going extinct. Others, like Homo erectus, were some of the first to leave Africa and spread across the world. Evolution didn't happen in a single step. It was a long, gradual process with many twists and turns. Even today, evolution hasn't stopped. Humans continue to adapt, just at a slower rate than in the past. Traits like lactose tolerance, resistance to diseases, and even changes in brain structure show that we are still evolving. The difference is that instead of natural selection shaping us through survival pressures, modern medicine, technology, and culture play a huge role in our future development. So no, humans didn't evolve directly from monkeys. We share a distant ancestor with them, but we are part of a separate evolutionary branch. The next time someone says we came from monkeys, you'll know the truth. Our story is far more intricate than that. Evolution isn't about a simple transformation from one species to another. It's about gradual changes over time, shaped by nature, survival, and adaptation. And our journey isn't over yet. The moon has a dark side. At least that's what you've probably heard. It's been repeated in movies, books, and even everyday conversation. The idea sounds mysterious, almost eerie. One half of the moon shrouded in eternal darkness, hidden from our view. But the truth is, there is no permanent dark side of the moon. Every part of the moon experiences daylight, just like Earth. So where did this myth come from? The misunderstanding likely comes from the way the moon orbits Earth. The moon is tidally locked, meaning the same side always faces us. No matter when or where you look up, you'll always see the same lunar surface. This happens because the moon takes the same amount of time to rotate on its axis as it does to orbit Earth. About 27.3 days. As a result, one side is always turned toward us, while the other remains hidden. But just because we don't see the far side doesn't mean it's in permanent darkness. The moon still rotates, and as it does, sunlight reaches all of its surface at different times. The far side of the moon gets just as much sunlight as the side we see. It just isn't visible from Earth. When our side of the moon is fully illuminated, we call it a full moon. At that time, the far side is experiencing its own new moon phase, meaning it's in shadow. But as the cycle continues, sunlight shifts across the surface, just like day and night on Earth. The far side of the moon wasn't seen by humans until 1959, when the Soviet spacecraft Luna 3 sent back the first photos. What scientists discovered was surprising. The far side looks very different from the side we see. The near side, the one visible from Earth, has large dark lava plains called Maria, but the far side is covered in craters and has very few Maria. Scientists believe this difference is due to variations in the moon's crust thickness and past volcanic activity. Despite its name, the dark side of the moon isn't always dark. In fact, when there's a new moon on Earth, when we see no moonlight in the night sky, the far side is fully illuminated by the sun. The only time the far side is truly in darkness is during a lunar eclipse, when Earth blocks sunlight from reaching it. Otherwise, every part of the moon experiences roughly 2 weeks of daylight followed by 2 weeks of night. This myth persists partly because the phrase dark side of the moon sounds poetic and mysterious. It's been used in music, literature, and pop culture, reinforcing the idea that there's an eternally shadowed side of the moon. But scientifically, the term far side of the moon is more accurate. It's not always dark, it's just hidden from view. The moon's tidal locking is why we only see one face, but every part of the lunar surface sees sunlight at some point. The next time someone mentions the dark side of the moon, you'll know the truth. There's no permanent darkness, just a side we never see from Earth. Mount Everest is known as the tallest mountain on Earth. It's the ultimate challenge for climbers, a symbol of extreme height. But what if that's not entirely true? What if the idea of Everest being the tallest is only one way of looking at it? While Everest is the highest peak above sea level, it's not actually the tallest mountain when measured from base to peak. The reason Everest is considered the highest mountain is because of its elevation. It rises 8,848.86 meters, 29,031.7 feet above sea level. That's the standard way we measure mountain heights, starting from the ocean's surface, and by that measurement, Everest stands at the top. But there are other ways to measure a mountain's true height. Take Mauna Kea, a massive volcano in Hawaii. From its base on the ocean floor to its peak, Mauna Kea measures over 10,200 meters, 33,500 feet. That makes it about 1,300 meters taller than Everest. The reason it doesn't hold the title is because much of its height is hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean. Only 4,205 meters of Mauna Kea rise above sea level, so it doesn't get the same recognition. But if we measured mountains from base to summit, Mauna Kea would be the true tallest. Then there's Chimborazo, a volcano in Ecuador. It's nowhere near as tall as Everest when measured by elevation. It reaches only 6,263 meters, 20,548 feet above sea level. But Chimborazo has a unique advantage. Because Earth isn't a perfect sphere, it bulges at the equator. This means that mountains located near the equator are actually farther from Earth's center than those at higher latitudes. When measured from the planet's core, Chimborazo's summit is the farthest point from Earth's center, beating Everest by about 2 kilometers. So, Everest is the highest peak above sea level, Mauna Kea is the tallest from base to summit, and Chimborazo is the farthest from Earth's core. Each of these mountains is the tallest in its own way. The idea that Everest is the absolute tallest depends on how you define tallest. Tallest. But there's a reason Everest still holds its legendary status. Climbing it is a monumental challenge requiring extreme endurance, technical skill, and survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The summit sits in the death zone, where oxygen levels are dangerously low and temperatures can drop to 60 degrees C, 76 degrees F. Climbing Mauna Kea doesn't require special equipment or supplemental oxygen. Everest remains the ultimate test for mountaineers, which is why it continues to be the most famous peak on Earth. The next time someone says Everest is the tallest mountain, you'll know there's more to the story. Everest is the highest above sea level, but it's not the tallest in every sense. It all depends on how you measure it. People love to say that toilets flush in opposite directions depending on whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. It sounds like a cool scientific fact, something that makes the world feel more mysterious, but is it actually true? Not really. The idea comes from a real scientific phenomenon called the Coriolis effect. This effect happens because the Earth is constantly spinning. As the planet rotates, it influences how air and water move over large distances. It's why hurricanes spin counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. That's a real, measurable effect, but it only applies to massive weather systems, not something as small as a toilet bowl. In reality, the direction a toilet flushes has nothing to do with the Coriolis effect. It's controlled by the design of the toilet itself. The way the water jets are positioned inside the bowl determines which way the water swirls. Some toilets are designed to flush clockwise, some counterclockwise, and some just go straight down. You could have 2 toilets in the same house, flushing in opposite directions simply because they were made differently. If the Coriolis effect did control toilet water, you'd expect every toilet in the northern hemisphere to flush one way and every toilet in the southern hemisphere to flush the other. But that's not what happens. You can travel between hemispheres and find toilets flushing in both directions. It's all about plumbing, not physics. Some people claim you can see the Coriolis effect in action by watching water drain from a sink or bathtub. But in reality, the effect is far too weak to influence something that small. The way water drains in a sink is mostly determined by the shape of the basin, how level the surface is, and even how the water was poured in. You could get different results just by shifting the sink slightly or draining it from a different spot. However, scientists have proven that the Coriolis effect does influence water movement, but only under carefully controlled conditions. In a lab experiment, researchers used a perfectly still pool of water in a specially designed tank. After letting the water settle for hours, they pulled a plug in the center and observed a slow rotation consistent with the Coriolis effect. But this experiment had to eliminate all other variables, and the effect took hours to become noticeable. So, that's nothing like the rush of water in a flushing toilet. So, while the Coriolis effect is real and plays a major role in weather patterns, it has no impact on your toilet. The idea that flushing changes direction between hemispheres is one of those myths that sounds scientific, but doesn't hold up to real-world testing. The next time you hear someone say this, you'll know the truth. Toilets don't care where you are on the planet. They just flush the way they were designed to. What happens if you swallow gum? At first you don't think much of it. It's just gum, your stomach will handle it, right? But then that old warning creeps in. Gum stays in your stomach for 7 years. It doesn't digest. It just sits there stuck. And suddenly you wonder, is that true? This is one of the most persistent myths about digestion. The idea that gum lingers in your stomach, refusing to break down, has been passed down for generations. But the truth? It's far less dramatic. Your body may not digest gum the way it does other foods, but that doesn't mean it stays inside you forever. Gum is made of a few key ingredients: sweeteners, flavorings, softeners, and a gum base. The gum base is what gives it that rubbery, chewy texture, and it's made of synthetic polymers, waxes, and resins. Unlike normal food breaks down into nutrients, the gum base resists digestion. But that doesn't mean it sticks to your stomach walls for years. The body has a system for dealing with indigestible materials. Just like fiber, which your body can't fully break down, gum moves through your digestive system, passes through your intestines, and is eliminated naturally. It doesn't linger for years. It usually exits your body within a few days. So where did the 7-year myth come from? Most likely it started as a way to discourage kids from swallowing gum. Simple scare tactic meant to stop bad habits. But like many myths, it took on a life of its own. The idea of something sitting in your stomach for years is unsettling, and that fear helped keep the myth alive. But why doesn't gum break down like other foods? It all comes down to digestion. Your stomach uses acids and enzymes to break food into tiny molecules that your body can absorb for energy. Carbohydrates, proteins, and fats all break down in different ways. But gum base is different. It's designed to be resistant to moisture and digestive enzymes, which is why it keeps its chewiness for so long. Still, that doesn't mean it just sits there. Your body has a built-in system for removing anything it can't digest. Just like your digestive tract pushes out fiber, seeds, and other indigestible materials, it does the same with gum. It travels through your intestines and exits just like everything else, typically within 24 to 48 hours. That's not to say swallowing gum is completely harmless. In rare cases, if someone swallows excessive amounts, especially young children, it can lead to digestive blockages. When large amounts of gum combine with other indigestible materials, they can form a mass called a bezoar, which can cause constipation or discomfort. But for most people, swallowing a piece of gum now and then won't cause any harm. So no, gum doesn't stay in your stomach for years. The body knows how to handle it, just like it does with other indigestible materials. The myth has been around for decades, but there's no truth to it. What's still best to spit gum out into the trash. One accidental swallow won't do any harm. The 7-year rule, completely false. What happens when a bull sees red? If you've ever watched a bullfight, you've seen the matador wave a bright red cape, provoking the bull into charging. It seems obvious. The bull must be furious at the color itself. Red equals danger. Red equals rage. But what if everything you thought about this was wrong? The truth is, bulls don't actually hate the color red. In fact, they can't even see it the way we do. Like many other animals, bulls are red-green colorblind. Their eyes lack the receptors needed to distinguish red from other colors, meaning that a bright red cape looks more like a dull gray or brown to them. The idea that bulls charge because of the color is a complete myth. So if it's not the red, what makes the bull attack? It all comes down to movement. When the matador waves the cape, the rapid motion grabs the bull's attention. Like many prey animals, bulls are highly responsive to movement. They react not to the shade of the fabric, but to the way it flicks and sways in front of them. That's why a bull will charge no matter what color the cape is. If a matador used a blue, green, or even black cape, the result would be the same. So where did this myth come from? Most likely, it's the dramatic nature of bullfighting itself. The red cape, known as the emulita, is used in the final stage of a bullfight, right before the matador delivers the final blow. The intensity of this moment, combined with the bull's aggressive charges, created the illusion that the red cape was triggering the attack. Over time, the idea that bulls hate the color red became widely accepted, even though science proves otherwise. Interestingly, the cape isn't always red. During earlier stages of the fight, matadors often use a larger, two-tone cape that's pink on one side and yellow on the other. But since the final, most dramatic part of the performance uses red, that's the image that sticks in people's minds. The red isn't for the bull, it's for the audience. The bright color helps mask the bloodstains and adds to the spectacle. This myth also spread through pop culture. Cartoons and movies often show bulls going into a blind rage at the sight of red, making it seem like an undeniable fact. Even outside of bullfighting, people assume wearing red near a bull is a bad idea. But in reality, a bull doesn't care about the color, it only reacts to movement and perceived threats. Despite what we've been led to believe, bulls don't see red as a threat. They react to motion, not color. If you ever find yourself face to face with a bull, it won't be your red shirt that makes it charge. It'll be how you move. The idea that bulls hate the color red? Completely false. What happens to your body after you die? There's a common belief that even after death, your hair and nails continue to grow. It's a chilling thought. The idea that even in the grave, some part of you is still alive, still changing. But is this really what happens? The truth is, hair and nails do not continue growing after death. This myth comes from a misunderstanding of how the human body decomposes. While it may appear that hair and nails grow post-mortem, the reality is much different. To understand why, we need to look at what actually happens after death. The body immediately begins to lose moisture. Without blood circulation, the skin dries out and retracts. This shrinking effect exposes more of the hair and nails that were previously hidden under the skin, creating the illusion of growth. But in reality, nothing is growing at all. Hair growth requires a living body. Hair follicles rely on nutrients delivered through the bloodstream to produce new cells. Once the heart stops beating, that process shuts down entirely. The same goes for nails. New nail growth depends on cell production beneath the cuticle, which also requires a constant supply of oxygen and nutrients. Without circulation, both hair and nails stop growing immediately. So where did this myth come from? Likely from early observations of bodies that appear to have longer nails and hair than when they were last seen alive. Before modern embalming techniques, bodies were often buried quickly, sometimes even exhumed later. The natural process of dehydration and skin shrinkage could make hair and nails seem longer than before, reinforcing the belief that they were still growing. Adding to the confusion, historical accounts from grave robbers, medical examiners, and morticians helped spread the myth. Before we fully understood decomposition, it was easy to misinterpret what was happening. The eerie sight of exposed nail beds and hairlines appearing more prominent gave rise to the belief that something unnatural was at play. Even in modern times, the myth persists. Movies and books love the eerie idea of a body continuing to change after death, fueling the misconception. But the science is clear. Without blood flow, cell production stops, and growth is impossible. So no, hair and nails don't grow after death. It only looks that way because the skin shrinks, revealing more of what was already there. It's one of those myths that sounds eerie enough to be true, but in reality, it's just an illusion. The idea that hair and nails keep growing after death. Completely false. What if everything you thought about America's Independence Day was wrong? Every year, fireworks light up the sky, people celebrate with barbecues, and history books teach that the United States declared independence on July 4, 1776. But what if that date isn't actually when independence was declared? The truth is, the United States didn't officially declare independence on July 4. The real decision happened 2 days earlier, on July 2, 1776, when the Continental Congress voted to break away from Britain. That was the moment the American colonies legally separated from British rule. John Adams even wrote to his wife, Abigail, predicting that July 2 would be celebrated as the nation's great anniversary. But that's not how history remembers it. So why do we celebrate on July 4? That's the day the final wording of the Declaration of Independence was approved. The document itself wasn't signed by most delegates until August 2. Some didn't sign until much later. But because the official document was dated July 4, that became the day Americans associated with independence. Adding to the confusion, copies of the Declaration were sent out after July 4, and newspapers began spreading the news of independence in the following weeks. Since the public didn't witness the actual vote on July 2, July 4 became the widely accepted date, independence. Even stranger, the famous 4th of July celebrations didn't become common right away. In the early years, different states celebrated on different days. It wasn't until the 19th century that July 4 became the official national holiday we recognize today. And here's an eerie historical twist. Both Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, two of the most important figures behind the Declaration, died on the same day, July 4th, 1826. The coincidence reinforced the date's significance, further cementing the idea that July 4 was the day America became independent. So, did the US really declare independence on July 4th, 1776? Not exactly. The vote that made America independent happened July 2. The signing took place over weeks and months. But because history is shaped by perception, the date written on the Declaration became the one people remembered. The idea that independence was officially declared on July 4? Completely false. What if one of history's most infamous quotes was never actually spoken? Marie Antoinette, the last queen of France before the Revolution, is famously remembered for saying, "I let them eat cake." The phrase has been used for centuries as proof of her arrogance and disconnect from the suffering of the poor. But what if she never actually said it? The truth is there's no evidence Marie Antoinette ever uttered those words. The phrase itself, Quills mangent de la brioche, was recorded years before she was even queen. French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote about it in his 1760s autobiography, Confessions, attributing it to an unnamed great princess. At the time, Marie Antoinette was just a child, living in Austria. She couldn't have said it. So where did the quote come from? The phrase, "let them eat cake," was meant to highlight the indifference of the upper class toward the struggles of the poor. In pre-revolutionary France, bread was the staple food, and when wheat shortages led to rising bread prices, starvation followed. The idea that a noblewoman would suggest the starving masses simply eat brie, a richer, more expensive bread, was meant to illustrate just how out of touch the aristocracy was. But Marie Antoinette was not as ignorant or heartless as history makes her out to be. While she did live a life of luxury at Versailles, records suggest she was aware of the suffering outside the palace walls. In fact, there are accounts of her making charitable donations, adopting poor children, and even expressing concern about food shortages. She may not have fully grasped the depth of France's problems, but she wasn't as callous as the infamous quote suggests. So why did this myth persist? During the French Revolution, propaganda was a powerful tool. Revolutionaries wanted to paint the monarchy as corrupt, detached, and unworthy of rule. Marie Antoinette, as a foreign-born queen with expensive taste, became the perfect villain. The phrase fit the image people wanted to believe. A queen so oblivious she thought starving peasants could simply switch to luxury pastries. Over time, the quote became cemented in history. Writers, artists, and filmmakers repeated the phrase, turning it to one of the most enduring myths of all time. Even today, it's used as a symbol of elite ignorance. But despite its popularity, no historian has ever found proof that Marie Antoinette actually said it. The truth is much simpler. A "let them eat cake" was never about Marie Antoinette. It was a fictional line, twisted by history, and used to justify the anger of the revolution. The idea that she ever spoke those words? Completely false. What if everything you thought about your senses was wrong? From childhood, we're taught that humans experience the world through 5 senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. It seems simple, logical, and complete. But what if that idea is outdated? What if you actually have far more than 5 senses? The truth is, humans have multiple senses beyond the traditional 5. Scientists estimate we have at least 9, and possibly more than 20. The idea of 5 senses dates back to Aristotle, who categorized human perception based on external stimuli. But modern science has revealed that our ability to sense the world is far more complex than just sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. For example, have you ever felt dizzy after spinning around? That's your vestibular sense at work. Located in your inner ear, it helps you maintain balance and detect motion. Without it, you wouldn't be able to stand upright or walk without falling over. It's a completely separate sense from touch, yet it plays a critical role in how you experience the world. Then there's proprioception, your body's ability to sense where it is in space. Close your eyes and try touching your nose with your finger. You can do it without looking because your brain constantly tracks the position of your limbs. That's not sight, touch, or sound. It's an entirely different sensory system working behind the scenes. Temperature perception, known as thermoception, is another sense. Your ability to feel heat and cold is separate from touch. Specialized nerve receptors detect temperature changes, helping you avoid danger, like pulling your hand away from a hot stove before it burns you. Pain perception, or nociception, is yet another distinct sense. While it may seem like a form of touch, it functions independently. Pain receptors in your skin, muscles, and organs detect injury and send signals to your brain, alerting you to harm. Some medical conditions, like congenital insensitivity to pain, prove that pain perception isn't just a variation of touch, it's its own sensory system. Then there's chronosen, your sense of time. You don't just rely on clocks to track time. Your brain has an internal clock that helps you estimate seconds, minutes, and hours. Some people naturally have a strong sense of time, while others struggle with it, but it exists independently from the 5 traditional senses. Even beyond these, scientists continue to discover more sensory abilities. Some researchers argue that hunger and thirst are separate senses. Others point to the body's ability to detect oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood, helping regulate breathing. So, are the 5 senses all we have? Absolutely not. The reality is far more complex. Humans rely on multiple senses to navigate the world, some obvious, some hidden, and some we're still uncovering. The idea that we only have 5 senses? Completely false. What if everything you thought about alcohol and brain cells was wrong? For years, we've been told that drinking alcohol permanently kills brain cells, leading to irreversible brain damage. It's a terrifying idea. Every sip of beer or wine supposedly destroying your neurons forever. But what if that's not actually true? The truth is, moderate alcohol consumption does not kill brain cells. The idea that alcohol permanently destroys neurons is a myth that has been repeated for decades. While excessive drinking can damage the brain in other ways, the idea that brain cells are directly and permanently killed is scientifically inaccurate. So where did this myth come from? The belief that alcohol kills brain cells dates back to the 19th century, when doctors studied the effects of alcohol on the body. Early medical illustrations showed shrunken, damaged brains in alcoholics, leading people to assume that drinking directly destroyed brain cells. Later, prohibitionists in the early 20th century used the claim as a scare tactic to discourage alcohol consumption. But modern neuroscience tells a different story. Alcohol does affect the brain, but not by killing neurons. Instead, it disrupts communication between them. When you drink, alcohol interferes with neurotransmitters, the chemical messengers that allow brain cells to communicate. This is why intoxication causes slurred speech, impaired coordination, and memory lapses. But once alcohol leaves your system, normal brain function returns. However, chronic heavy drinking can damage the brain in other ways. Long-term alcohol abuse can shrink brain tissue, weaken connections between neurons, and cause deficiencies in essential nutrients like thiamine, which can lead to serious conditions like Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, a disorder that impairs memory and coordination. But even in severe cases, the brain has some ability to recover. Studies show that when heavy drinkers quit alcohol, certain areas of the brain can regain volume and function over time. Another factor is neurogenesis, the process by which new brain cells are formed. For decades, scientists believed that adults couldn't grow new neurons, but recent research shows that the brain continues producing new cells, particularly in the hippocampus, a region critical for memory. This means that even if alcohol damages certain areas of the brain, recovery is possible and new neurons can still be generated. So, does alcohol kill brain cells permanently? No. While excessive drinking can harm the brain in other ways, the idea that every drink destroys neurons forever is simply not true. The human brain is far more resilient than the myth suggests. The belief that alcohol permanently kills brain cells. Completely false. What if everything you thought about sleepwalking was wrong? You've probably heard the warning. Never wake a sleepwalker, it could shock them so badly they might die. The idea is everywhere, from horror movies to well-meaning advice passed down for generations. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, waking a sleepwalker won't kill them. There's no scientific evidence that suggests being suddenly awakened during sleepwalking can trigger a fatal shock, heart attack, or brain damage. While it's true that waking a sleepwalker can confuse or frighten them, the idea that it could be deadly is pure myth. So where did this belief come from? Sleepwalking or somnambulism has been misunderstood for centuries. In ancient times, it was often associated with supernatural forces, possession, or even moonlight-induced madness. During the 19th and 20th centuries, some medical theories suggested that waking a sleepwalker could send their brain into a state of extreme panic, possibly causing a heart attack or a complete mental breakdown. But modern sleep science has debunked these fears. So, that doesn't mean waking a sleepwalker is always a good idea. While it won't kill them, it can be dangerous. Sleepwalkers have little to no awareness of their surroundings. If startled awake, they may become confused, frightened. More importantly, they may be in the middle of something risky, walking downstairs, wandering outside, or even attempting to drive. In these cases, waking them suddenly could cause them to stumble, fall, or react unpredictably, leading to injury. Instead of forcefully waking a sleepwalker, experts recommend a gentler approach. The best strategy is to guide them calmly back to bed. Speaking softly or lightly touching their arm can help them return to sleep without distress. If sleepwalking is a frequent problem, it's worth identifying possible triggers. Stress, sleep deprivation, and certain medications can all increase the likelihood of sleepwalking episodes. Sleepwalking itself is more common than many people realize. It primarily affects children, though adults can experience it too, especially under high stress or after consuming alcohol or sedatives. Most sleepwalkers don't remember their episodes, and in many cases they grow out of it with time. So, does waking a sleepwalker really kill them? Absolutely not. While it might startle them or make them temporarily confused, there's no medical reason why it would be fatal. The real danger comes from their surroundings, not from waking them. The idea that waking a sleepwalker can kill them? Completely false. What if everything you thought about vaccines and autism was wrong? For years, a dangerous myth has circulated. The claim that vaccines cause autism. It's been repeated in viral posts, conspiracy theories, and even by celebrities. But what if that belief is based on misinformation, fear, and a single fraudulent study? The truth is, vaccines do not cause autism. This claim originates from a 1998 study by Andrew Wakefield, a British doctor who suggested a link between the MMR vaccine, mumps, rubella, and autism. But there was one major problem. His study was completely fraudulent. Wakefield's research was based on just 12 children, and his methods were deeply flawed. Investigations later revealed he had manipulated data and failed to disclose financial conflicts of interest. He had been paid by lawyers suing vaccine manufacturers, creating a clear motive for his claims. His work was so dishonest that the study was retracted, and he lost his medical license. Since then, dozens of large-scale studies involving millions of children worldwide have found no connection between vaccines and autism. So why does this myth persist? Fear spreads faster than facts. The internet amplified vaccine skepticism, with social media fueling misinformation. Well-meaning parents trying to protect their children became vulnerable to fear-based messaging, even as overwhelming scientific evidence disproved the autism vaccine link. Autism is a complex condition with genetic and environmental factors, but vaccines are not one of them. Research shows that autism symptoms often become noticeable around the same age when children receive vaccines. leading them to mistakenly connect the two. But correlation does not mean causation. Autism rates have risen in recent decades, but this is due to improved awareness and expanded diagnostic criteria, not vaccines. The real danger isn't vaccines. It's avoiding them. When vaccination rates drop, deadly diseases like measles, once nearly eradicated, start making a comeback. Measles cases have surged in recent years, largely due to vaccine hesitancy, putting vulnerable populations, especially children, at risk. Some anti-vaccine activists claim that vaccine ingredients, like thimerosal, are harmful. But thimerosal, a preservative that contains ethyl mercury, was removed from childhood vaccines in the early 2000s, yet autism rates continued to rise. If vaccines were responsible, autism diagnoses should have dropped, but they didn't. So do vaccines cause autism? No, the science is clear. The claim is based on a debunked study and has no basis in reality. Vaccines save millions of lives. The idea that they cause autism, completely false. What if everything you thought about sharks and their sense of smell was wrong? You've probably heard the claim that sharks can detect a single drop of blood from miles away. It's a terrifying idea. One tiny cut in the ocean, and suddenly sharks are coming for you. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, while sharks do have an incredible sense of smell, the idea that they can detect a drop of blood from miles away is a huge exaggeration. Sharks rely on multiple senses to hunt, and while their ability to detect certain chemicals in water is impressive, it's not the supernatural ability that many people believe. So where did this myth come from? It likely started because sharks do have highly sensitive olfactory organs, allowing them to detect tiny amounts of substances in water. Some species can sense a single part of blood in a million parts of water, which sounds impressive, but that's very different from smelling a drop of blood from miles away. The effectiveness of their sense of smell depends on water currents, the dilution of substances, and other environmental factors. To put it in perspective, if a shark is about a quarter mile away, it might be able to detect blood if the ocean conditions are just right. But from miles away, that's simply not possible. Unlike air, water disperses chemicals much more slowly, and scent particles don't travel in a straight line. Instead, they spread out and get diluted over time. A shark would have to be down current, moving toward the source, and even then, the scent would take time to reach them. Another major misconception is that sharks are instantly drawn to human blood. While they can detect blood, they're much more interested in the scent of their natural prey, like fish or seals. Sharks can distinguish between different types of scents, and human blood doesn't automatically trigger feeding frenzy. In fact, experiments have shown that sharks often ignore human blood entirely, preferring the scent of wounded fish instead. Sharks also rely on more than just smell to hunt. They use their vision, movement detection, and even electroreception, which allows them to sense the faint electrical signals given off by living creatures. Smell is just one of many tools they use to locate prey. The real danger for swimmers isn't a single drop of blood, it's movement. Splashing or erratic swimming patterns mimic the behavior of injured fish, which is far more likely to attract a shark's attention than a minor cut. That's why surfers, who move in ways that resemble struggling prey, are more likely to be mistaken for food than swimmers with a small wound. So can sharks smell blood? Yes, but within realistic limits. Their sense of smell is powerful, but it's not magic. The idea that a single drop of blood can be detected from miles away, completely false. What if everything you thought about DNA in humans was wrong? You've probably heard that humans have the most DNA in the animal kingdom, that our genetic complexity must mean we have the largest genome. It sounds logical. After all, humans are capable of abstract thought, language, technology, and self-awareness. But what if that assumption is completely false? The truth is, humans don't even come close to having the most DNA. While our genome consists of about 3 billion base pairs, there are plenty of species with far more. In fact, some amphibians, plants, and even single-celled organisms put our genome size to shame. So, where did this myth come from? It likely stems from the belief that intelligence and complexity should correlate with DNA quantity. People assume that since humans are advanced, we must have more genetic material than the simpler creatures, but that's not how DNA works. Genome size does not directly determine intelligence, complexity, or evolutionary superiority. Consider the marbled lungfish. This freshwater species holds the record for the largest known genome, with a staggering 130 billion base pairs, more than 40 times the amount in humans. And it's not The axolotl, a type of salamander, has around 32 billion base pairs. Even the humble onion has a genome that's 5 times larger than ours. So why do these organisms have so much DNA? The answer lies in junk DNA, non-coding sequences that don't directly contribute to an organism's traits or function. Humans have plenty of junk DNA, but other species have even more, leading to massive genomes that don't necessarily make them more advanced. Meanwhile, some incredibly simple creatures have less DNA than humans. The pufferfish, for example, has one of the smallest vertebrate genomes, yet it functions just fine. This proves that genome size is not a measure of intelligence or complexity. Some species simply accumulate more DNA over time, while others streamline their genetic code. Another reason this myth persists is the assumption that more DNA means more genes, but humans only have about 20,000 protein-coding genes, roughly the same number as mice and fewer than some plants. Genetic efficiency, not sheer quantity, is what truly matters. So do humans have the most DNA in the animal kingdom? Not even close. The idea that more DNA equals a more advanced organism is a common misconception. In reality, we're easily outmatched by lungfish, salamanders, and even onions. What if everything you thought about the left and right brain was wrong? You've probably heard that the left side of your brain controls logic and reasoning, while the right side is responsible for creativity and emotion. According to this idea, people are either left-brained thinkers, analytical, structured and detail-oriented, or right-brained thinkers, artistic, imaginative and free-spirited. It's a simple, satisfying explanation for how our minds work. But what if it's completely false? The truth is, the idea that the left and right hemispheres of the brain work independently is a myth, While it's true that different areas of the brain specialize in certain functions, the two hemispheres are constantly communicating and working together. There is no such thing as a purely left-brained or right-brained person. Everyone uses both hemispheres all the time. So where did this myth come from? It started with studies on patients who had undergone a split brain procedure, a surgery that severs the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerves connecting the two hemispheres. These studies, conducted in the 1960s, showed that when the connection was cut, the two sides of the brain could function somewhat independently. This led to the oversimplified idea that each hemisphere was responsible for entirely separate functions. Over time, pop psychology took hold of this concept and turned it into the idea that logical people rely on their left brain, while creative people use their right. Neuroscience has since debunked this. Brain scans show that almost everything we do involves both hemispheres working together. Language, often thought to be controlled entirely by the left hemisphere, actually involves regions on both sides of the brain. Creativity, which has long been associated with the right hemisphere, also engages areas from both hemispheres. Even activities like math and problem solving, once considered purely left-brain functions, require input from both sides. The reality is, the brain is not a neatly divided system where one half is analytical and the other half is artistic. The hemispheres are interconnected, and most cognitive tasks require input from multiple areas at once. A musician, for example, needs logic and structure to read notes, often linked to the left hemisphere, but also emotion and intuition to interpret the music, associated with the right hemisphere. An engineer needs creativity to design new solutions and analytical thinking to execute them effectively. So, do the left and right hemispheres work independently? Not at all. The idea that people are either left-brained or right-brained is a myth with no scientific backing. The brain functions as a whole, with both hemispheres constantly working together, making us far more complex and adaptable than a simple left-right divide suggests us on. What if everything you thought about falling pennies was wrong? You've probably heard the claim that if you drop a penny from the top of a skyscraper, it could strike someone below with enough force to kill them. It's a terrifying idea, one tiny coin accelerated by gravity becoming a deadly projectile. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, a penny dropped from any height, even the tallest building in the world, wouldn't have nearly enough force to kill someone. In fact, by the time it reaches the ground, it wouldn't even be traveling fast enough to cause serious injury. The idea that a falling penny is lethal is nothing more than a myth. So where did this myth come from? It likely originates from a misunderstanding of physics. People assume that because gravity pulls objects downward, the longer they fall, the faster and deadlier they become. In theory, this makes sense, except for one crucial factor: air resistance. When a penny is dropped, it starts accelerating due to gravity. However, as it falls, it collides with air molecules, creating drag. Unlike a dense, aerodynamic object like a bullet, a penny is small, lightweight, and flat. This means it tumbles chaotically as it falls, losing energy to air resistance. Eventually, it reaches terminal velocity, the maximum speed it can achieve when the forces of gravity and air resistance are balanced. For a penny, this speed is only about 25 to 30 miles per hour. That might sound fast, but it's nowhere near enough to be lethal. To put it into perspective, getting hit by a penny at terminal velocity would feel similar to having a bug land on you. It might sting for a moment, but it wouldn't penetrate the skin, let alone cause serious harm. Even if the penny hits someone on the head, the most it could cause is a slight annoyance, not a fatal injury. In contrast, if you were to drop something dense and aerodynamic, like a ball bearing or a metal dart, it could reach much higher speeds and pose a real danger. Experiments have been conducted to test this myth, including ones by scientists in TV shows like Mythbusters. In every case, the results were the same. A falling penny is harmless. In fact, some tests even launched pennies at higher speeds than terminal velocity, and still they failed to do significant damage. So, can a penny drop from a skyscraper kill someone? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Air resistance keeps it from becoming a deadly projectile, capping its speed and preventing it from gaining enough momentum to cause serious injury. The next time you hear someone repeat this myth, you'll know the truth. A penny isn't a miniature missile, it's just a harmless piece of metal floating down to the ground. What if everything you thought about ancient beliefs was wrong? You've probably heard that people in ancient times believed the Earth was flat, but before modern science, most of humanity assumed we lived on a giant pancake-like world. It's a story repeated so often that it seems undeniable. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, educated people have known the Earth was round for over 2,000 years. The idea that ancient civilizations believed in a flat Earth is largely a myth, exaggerated over time. In reality, many cultures understood the Earth's spherical nature long before modern science confirmed it. So where did this misconception come from? It likely stems from oversimplified history and a misunderstanding of how ancient knowledge evolved. While some early societies may have imagined a flat world, civilizations with advanced astronomy, like the Greeks, Egyptians, and even some early Mesopotamians, figured out the truth surprisingly early. By the 5th century BCE, Greek philosophers such as Pythagoras and later Aristotle had gathered enough observational evidence to conclude that the Earth was round. They noticed that during lunar eclipses, the Earth cast a circular shadow on the Moon, something that could only happen if the Earth were a sphere. Sailors and travelers also observed that ships disappeared hull first over the horizon, rather than simply shrinking out of view, further proving the curve of the Earth. One of the most famous proofs came from the Greek mathematician Eratosthenes in the 3rd century BCE. By measuring the angles of shadows in 2 different cities at the same time, he was able to calculate the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy. His work left little doubt that the Earth was not only round, but measurable. Despite this knowledge, the myth of a universally flat Earth persisted. Much of this false narrative comes from the Middle Ages, where it's often claimed that Europeans rejected the idea of a spherical Earth. But this too is misleading. Medieval scholars, including those in Christian Europe, widely accepted that the Earth was round. Texts from the time referenced the Earth's curvature, and navigators used this understanding in their travels. Even Christopher Columbus, often said to have proven the Earth was round, wasn't fighting against flat Earth believers. He was arguing about the size of the Earth, not its shape. So why does this myth persist? It gained traction in the 19th century, when writers looking to portray the Middle Ages as an era of ignorance began spreading the false idea that people once believed in a flat Earth. Over time, this oversimplification became accepted as fact, even making its way into textbooks. So, did ancient people believe the Earth was flat? Not really. While some early societies may have had flat Earth models, advanced civilizations had already figured out the truth thousands of years ago. The idea that everyone believed in a flat world until modern times is nothing more than a historical misunderstanding, one that has persisted far longer than it should have. What if everything you thought about baby birds was wrong? You've probably heard the warning, never touch a baby bird or its mother will abandon it. The idea is that if a human scent gets on the chick, the mother will reject it, assuming it's been tainted or is no longer her own. It's a common belief passed down for generations. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, birds don't have a strong sense of smell, and most species can't even detect human scent. A mother bird will not reject her chick just because a person has touched it. In reality, parent birds are far more dedicated to their young than this myth suggests. So where did this misconception come from? It likely stems from good intentions. Parents and teachers often tell children not to touch wild animals, and this myth serves as a simple way to discourage unnecessary handling of baby birds. While it's true that human interference can sometimes be harmful, the idea that a mother bird will abandon her chick just because of scent is completely false. Most birds rely on sight and sound rather than smell to recognize their offspring. If a baby bird is handled and placed back in its nest, the parents will almost always continue to care for it as if nothing happened. They are driven by instinct, and their priority is raising their young, not worrying about a foreign scent. However, there are risks when handling a baby bird, but they have nothing to do with smell. If a bird is too young to fly and is found on the ground, it's important to determine whether it actually needs help. Many young birds, called fledglings, leave the nest before they can fly well. They spend time on the ground, learning to hop and flutter while their parents keep watch nearby. People often mistake these fledglings for abandoned chicks and try to rescue them when they don't need saving. The real danger to baby birds comes from stress and improper care. Handling a chick too much can cause distress, and if a well-meaning person takes it home, it will likely not survive without expert care. If you ever find a baby bird that is truly in danger, such as one that has fallen from the nest too early and is clearly helpless, the best thing to do is place it back in the nest or contact a wildlife rehabilitator. Even in cases where a nest has been disturbed, parent birds don't simply give up. Many species will rebuild a damaged nest or continue caring for their young in a relocated nest. Their instinct to nurture and protect is far stronger than any concern over an unfamiliar scent. So, does touching a baby bird cause its mother to reject it? This myth is a mix of caution and misinformation. While it's always best to leave wildlife undisturbed when possible, birds do not abandon their young just because a human has touched them. The next time you hear someone say otherwise, you'll know the truth. Mother birds aren't nearly as fickle as this myth would have you believe. What if everything you thought about the space pen was wrong? You've probably heard the story. NASA spent millions developing a fancy pen that could write in space while the Russians just used a simple pencil. It's a classic tale of government waste versus practical problem solving, often repeated as a critique of bureaucracy. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, NASA never spent millions developing a space pen, and Russia didn't just stick to pencils either. In reality, both the US and Soviet space programs faced the same problem. Regular pens didn't work in microgravity, and pencils came with serious risks. So where did this myth come from? It likely stems from the fact that NASA did initially use mechanical pencils in space. But there was a problem: pencils break. The tiny graphite tips could float away in zero gravity, potentially getting into astronauts' eyes, equipment, or even the spacecraft's electrical systems. Wood pencils weren't much better. If they splintered or caught fire, they could be a serious hazard in a high-oxygen environment. Enter Paul Fisher, an independent pen manufacturer. In the 1960s, he developed a pressurized ballpoint pen that could write in zero gravity, underwater, and even in extreme temperatures. He wasn't hired by NASA, nor did he receive millions in funding. He developed the pen on his own, investing around $1 million of his own money to create what became known as the Fisher Space Pen. Once it was ready, Fisher offered the pen to NASA, and after rigorous testing, they agreed to use it. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. The Soviet Union bought them too. In 1969, both NASA and the Soviet space program started using the Fisher space pen, paying just $2.39 per pen. No millions wasted, no extravagant spending, just a practical solution adopted by both sides. So why does the myth persist? It's an easy, compelling story. The idea of a bloated government wasting money while a rival nation finds a simple, common-sense solution makes for a great punchline, but in reality, it's completely inaccurate. NASA didn't waste millions on a pen, and the Russians didn't just stick with pencils. Both space agencies needed a reliable writing tool that wouldn't break, pose a fire hazard, or clog up sensitive equipment. The Fisher space pen solved that problem, and it was a private invention, not a government-funded project. So did NASA spend millions on a space pen while Russia used pencils? Not even close. The real story is one of innovation, practicality, and a private inventor solving a problem for astronauts on both sides of the Cold War. The next time you hear someone repeat this myth, you'll know the truth. Sometimes reality is far more interesting than the fiction. What if everything you thought about body heat was wrong? You've probably heard it before. We lose most of our body heat through our head. It's the reason people insist on wearing hats in cold weather, claiming that without one, you'll freeze. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, heat loss happens evenly across the body, not just through the head. In reality, you lose heat from any exposed skin, and the idea that most of it escapes through your head is nothing more than a long-standing myth. So, where did this misconception come from? It likely stems from an old military study in the 1950s. US Army researchers conducted cold weather survival experiments, exposing test subjects to freezing temperatures while wearing insulated suits, but no hats. Because their heads were the only uncovered part of their bodies, they naturally lost the most heat from that area. The results were misinterpreted, leading to the myth that most of our body heat escapes through the head. The problem? This experiment didn't reflect real-world conditions. In normal circumstances, where the head isn't the only exposed area, heat loss is distributed evenly across the body. Scientists now estimate that the head accounts for only about 10% of total body heat loss, roughly proportional to its surface area. In fact, if this myth were true, walking outside in winter without gloves or a coat wouldn't matter as long as you had a hat on. But anyone who's ever stepped out of freezing temperatures with bare hands knows that's not how it works. Heat escapes from any part of the body that's exposed, whether it's your head, arms, legs, or torso. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it makes sense. The head is an important part of the body, and since we don't usually cover it as much as the rest of ourselves, it feels like it loses the most heat. Plus, wearing a hat does help in cold weather, not because the head is special, but because covering any exposed skin helps conserve body heat. That said, the head does have a few unique properties. It has a rich blood supply, and we often don't cover it as much as other body parts, which can make it feel colder. But in terms of pure heat loss, the upper head isn't any more significant than any other part of the body. So, do humans lose most of their heat through their head? Not at all. The body loses heat from any exposed skin, and the head isn't some magical heat vent. While wearing a hat in winter is a good idea, it's not because your head is where all the heat escapes. It's simply because keeping any part of your body warm helps you stay comfortable. The next time someone insists you're freezing because you forgot a hat, you'll know the truth. Heat loss happens everywhere, not just up top. What if everything you thought about the internet's origins was wrong? You've probably heard that the internet was invented in the 1990s, created for public use as the World Wide Web took off. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, the internet existed long before the 1990s. It wasn't originally designed for the public. It was a military and research project, developed decades earlier. So where did this misconception come from? It likely stems from the launch of the World Wide Web in 1991. When websites and browsers became widely available, the internet felt like a brand new invention. But the technology behind it had been in development since the 1960s. The real story begins with ARPANET, a project funded by the US Department of Defense in 1969. ARPANET was the first network to connect computers across different locations, allowing researchers to share data remotely. It was the foundation of what would later become the internet. For years, ARPANET remained limited to scientists, universities, and government agencies. But in the 1980s, more networks emerged, and by 1983, ARPANET switched to a standardized communication system known as TCP/IP, the same protocol that powers the modern internet today. The real turning point came in 1989, when British scientist Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. Unlike the internet itself, which was just a system for connecting computers, the web allowed users to navigate information through links and web pages. This is what made the internet accessible to the public. So, was the internet invented in the 1990s? Not at all. The technology had been evolving for decades, long before the first websites appeared. The 1990s didn't invent the internet, They simply made it user-friendly. The next time someone tells you the internet was born in the 90s, you'll know the truth. It had already been around for decades, just waiting for the rest of the world to log in. What if everything you thought about bananas was wrong? You've probably heard it your whole life. Bananas grow on trees. It makes sense, right? They're tall, they have a trunk-like structure, and they produce fruit high off the ground. But what if that's not true at all? Truth is, bananas don't grow on trees because banana plants aren't trees. They may look like trees, but in reality, they're giant herbs closely related to plants like ginger and turmeric. That's right, bananas come from the world's largest herbaceous flowering plant, not a tree. So where did this misconception come from? It likely stems from how banana plants appear. They can grow over 20 feet tall with sturdy upright stems that resemble tree trunks. But unlike real trees, banana plants don't have woody tissue. Instead, their trunks are actually layers of tightly packed leaves, forming what's known as a pseudostem, a false stem, because the plant isn't made of true wood. It's not classified as a tree. Real trees, like apple or oak trees, have a hard woody trunk that grows thicker over time. Banana plants, on the other hand, regenerate from an underground root system called a rhizome. After producing fruit, the plant dies back, and new shoots grow in its place, making it function more like a perennial herb than a traditional tree. But that's not the only surprising thing about bananas, Wendy. The fruit itself isn't technically a fruit in the way most people think. It's a berry. Botanically speaking, a berry is a fleshy fruit that develops from a single ovary and contains seeds inside. Bananas fit this definition perfectly, even though their tiny seeds are barely noticeable. So why does this myth persist? Probably because bananas grow tall, live for years, and produce fruit like trees do. Plus, the term enduring banana tree is widely used in casual conversation, reinforcing the misconception. Since they look like trees, people naturally assume they are trees. But scientifically speaking, calling a banana plant a tree is incorrect. It's an herbaceous plant with a short lifespan, no real trunk, and a unique way of growing. And unlike trees, which spread their seeds to reproduce, Banana plants mostly grow from underground shoots, which is why most commercial bananas are actually clones of one another. So, do bananas grow on trees? Not at all. On trees? Not at all. They grow on giant herbs, with their towering pseudostems making them look like trees. The next time someone points out a banana tree, you'll know the truth. What they're looking at isn't a tree at all. It's just one of nature's biggest and most fascinating herbs. What if everything you thought about microwaving food was wrong? You've probably heard the claim. Microwaving destroys nutrients in food. Some people believe that using a microwave drains vitamins and minerals, leaving meals nutritionally empty. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, microwaving doesn't destroy nutrients any more than other cooking methods. In fact, it can actually preserve nutrients better than boiling or frying. The idea that microwaves zap nutrition is a myth, and science tells a very different story. So where did this misconception come from? It likely stems from a misunderstanding of how cooking affects food. Heat does break down some nutrients, but that happens with any form of cooking, whether you're boiling, baking, steaming, or frying. The real issue isn't the microwave itself, but how the food is cooked. Microwaves work by using electromagnetic waves to make water molecules in food vibrate, generating heat. This cooks food quickly and evenly without exposing it to high temperatures for long periods. And that's the key. Shorter cooking times mean fewer nutrients lost. Take vitamin C, for example. It's highly sensitive to heat, breaking down easily when food is cooked for too long. Boiling vegetables can leach out vitamin C into the water, which often gets discarded. Microwaving, on the other hand, uses minimal water and cooks food faster, preserving more of the vitamin. One study found that microwaving vegetables like broccoli preserved more antioxidants compared to boiling or frying. Another study showed that microwaved carrots and spinach retained higher levels of certain nutrients than those cooked on a stovetop. So why does this myth persist? Probably because the microwave radiation sounds scary. People associate the word irradiation with nuclear energy or harmful exposure, but in reality, microwave radiation is non-ionizing. It doesn't alter the chemical structure of food. It's the same type of energy used in radio waves and cell phones, just at a different frequency. Of course, improper microwaving can still affect nutrition. Overcooking food in the microwave, just like overcooking it on a stove, can degrade nutrients. But when used correctly, microwaving is one of the best ways to cook food quickly while retaining vitamins and minerals. So does microwaving destroy nutrients? Not at all. It's actually one of the most efficient cooking methods for preserving them. The next time someone warns you about microwaves are killing your food's nutrition, you'll know the truth. The real danger isn't the microwave. It's how long and at what temperature food is cooked. What if everything you thought about cows and stairs was wrong? You've probably heard it before. Cows can't walk downstairs. It's one of those stranger facts that gets repeated so often, most people just accept it. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, cows can walk downstairs. It's just really difficult for them. The idea that it's physically impossible is a myth, but there's a reason why you don't often see cows casually strolling down a flight of steps. So where did this misconception come from? It likely stems from the way cows are built. Their bodies are designed for stability on flat ground, with strong legs and hooves that work well on grass, dirt, and even gentle slopes. But stairs, that's a different challenge. Cows have limited knee flexibility, and their weight is unevenly distributed. Most of it is toward the front. Going upstairs isn't too hard for them because they can push themselves upward with their powerful back legs. But coming down is another story. The steep angle forces them to shift their weight forward, something their bodies aren't naturally designed to do. It makes them feel unbalanced, and their instinct tells them to avoid the risk. But does that mean they can't do it? Not exactly. If a cow is trained or guided carefully, it can descend stairs. However, it takes patience because they're naturally hesitant. Their vision plays a role too. Cows have poor depth perception, so stairs can look like a series of steep drops rather than a gradual decline. That's why they often freeze or refuse to move when faced with a staircase. So why does this myth persist? Probably because most cows don't walk downstairs in everyday life. Since they rarely encounter stairs on farms, there's little reason for them to learn. And when people do see a cow hesitate at the top of a staircase, it reinforces the belief that they simply can't do it. In reality, cows can handle slopes and even small step-like structures, but traditional stairs with steep, narrow steps make them uncomfortable. If the steps are shallow and wide enough, a cow is much more likely to attempt it. But standard stairs, like those built for humans, are just not suited for their body structure. So can cows walk downstairs? Yes, but not easily. It's not that their legs physically can't handle it, but rather that their body design, vision, and natural instincts make it extremely challenging. The next time someone insists it's impossible, you'll know the truth. Cows can descend stairs, but they'd much rather stay on solid ground. What if everything you thought about colour and heat was wrong? You've probably heard it before. Black absorbs the most heat. It's why people avoid wearing black in the summer, and why cars with dark paint jobs are said to heat up faster. But what if that's not the whole story? The truth is, black does absorb more heat than lighter colours, but it's not as simple as people think. While black surfaces pull in more energy from sunlight, the material, texture, and surrounding environment play a huge role in determining how much heat is actually retained. So where did this idea come from? It's based on a fundamental principle of physics. Dark colours absorb a wider range of light wavelengths, while lighter colours reflect more. When sunlight hits a black surface, nearly all of that energy is absorbed, converting it into heat. White, on the other hand, reflects most of the light, staying cooler. That's why people wear white or light colour clothing in hot climates. It helps deflect heat instead of trapping it. But absorption is only part of the equation. The material itself determines how much heat is retained. A black cotton shirt will feel much hotter than a black metal surface, even though both absorb light. That's because cotton holds onto heat, while metal quickly transfers it away. Another factor is emissivity, how well a surface releases heat. While black absorbs more, it also radiates heat faster than lighter colours. That means a black object may heat up quickly, but it can also cool down faster once the heat source is removed. This is why desert nomads sometimes wear black robes despite the heat. The fabric may absorb sunlight, but its loose design and heat-emitting properties keep air circulating, preventing overheating. And what heating? And what about inside a car? Yes, a black car will get hotter than a white one under direct sunlight, but interior materials matter just as much. A car with black leather seats will feel much hotter than one with light fabric seats, regardless of the exterior colour. The type of glass used on windows and the presence of tinting also play a role in regulating heat buildup. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it's based on a simple observation. Black does absorb more heat than white, but people tend to ignore the other factors at play. It's not just about colour, it's about what the colour is applied to and how it interacts with heat over time. So, does black absorb the most heat? Yes, but that's only part of the story. The next time someone insists that black is the hottest colour, you'll know the truth. Absorption is only one factor in heat retention, and what really matters is the material, its surroundings, and how it manages heat overall. What if everything you thought about spiders was wrong? You've probably heard the creepy claim people swallow an average of 8 spiders a year while sleeping. It's a terrifying thought, imagining tiny arachnids crawling into your mouth as you sleep. But what if that's not true at all? The truth is, this myth is completely false. There's no scientific evidence to suggest that spiders regularly crawl into people's mouths at night, let alone that we unknowingly swallow them. In reality, the chances of this happening are close to zero. So where did this myth come from? It likely spread as a combination of fear, misunderstanding, and internet folklore. Some believe it originated from a 1993 article meant to prove how easily misinformation spreads. The writer made up the spider swallowing a fact as an example of how people believe anything they read, especially if it plays into their fears. Ironically, the fake claim became one of the most widely shared urban legends. But let's think about this logically. Spiders are not suicidal creatures. They avoid humans whenever possible, not because they understand what we are, but because we're massive, unpredictable, and dangerous to them. A sleeping human is not an inviting place for a spider. Our breathing, heartbeat, and even minor movements create vibrations that warn spiders to stay away. Even if a spider somehow found its way onto your face, the chances of it deliberately crawling into your mouth are nearly non-existent. Our mouths aren't appealing environments for spiders, warm, moist, and constantly shifting. Plus, our reflexes would likely kick in before we swallowed one. A tickling sensation on the lips or tongue would trigger a reaction, waking us up or causing us to brush it away. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it plays into a common fear, arachnophobia. The idea of swallowing a spider in our most vulnerable state taps into deep-rooted anxieties, making the claim more believable. It's the same reason horror stories about insects in ears or bugs laying eggs under the skin spread so easily. Fear makes myths feel real. Of course, spiders do live in homes, and some might even end up in beds. But the idea that they routinely crawl into our mouths is completely unfounded. If anything, we're much more of a threat to them than they are to us. So, do people swallow spiders while sleeping? Not at all. The next time someone repeats this myth, you'll know the truth. Spiders want nothing to do with your mouth, and the real danger isn't swallowing them. It's believing everything you hear. What if everything you thought about sunflowers was wrong? You've probably heard the claim, sunflowers always face the sun. It's a beautiful idea, picturing endless fields of bright yellow flowers turning in perfect unison, following the sun from sunrise to sunset. But what if that's not the full story? The truth is, young sunflowers do track the sun, but once they mature, they stop moving altogether. This common belief is based on a real phenomenon called heliotropism, but it only applies to sunflowers in their early growth stages. So where did this myth come from? It likely spread because of the way young sunflowers behave. When they are still developing, their stems are flexible, and they follow the sun from east to west during the day, then reset to face east at night, ready for the next sunrise. This movement is controlled by their internal circadian rhythm and driven by growth hormones that elongate the cells on one side of the stem, causing the plant to bend toward the light. But once a sunflower reaches maturity, something changes. The stem becomes thicker, tougher, and more rigid, meaning it can no longer bend as easily. At this stage, the sunflower stops tracking the sun and settles into a fixed position, almost always facing east. Why east? Because research shows that east-facing flowers attract more pollinators as they warm up earlier in the morning, making them more appealing to bees and other insects. This means that a fully bloomed sunflower isn't moving at all. Instead of turning with the sun, it remains locked in place, waiting for pollinators to do their job. If you ever see a vast field of sunflowers you'll notice that all the mature flowers face the same direction, not moving at all. So why does this myth persist? Probably because people see young sunflowers move and assume they continue to do so forever. The idea of sunflowers always following the sun is poetic and visually striking, so it sticks in people's minds even though it's only partially true. Of course, sunflowers do rely on sunlight to grow, and heliotropism plays an essential role in their early development. But by the time they reach their full size, they stop tracking the sun and instead prioritize attracting pollinators. So, do sunflowers always face the sun? Not exactly. The next time someone tells you that sunflowers turn all day long, you'll know the truth. Only young sunflowers move, while fully bloomed ones stay locked in place, permanently facing east. What if everything you thought about eggs was wrong? You've probably heard the claim brown eggs are healthier than white eggs. It sounds logical, right? Brown often means more natural, less processed, and somehow more nutritious. But what if that's just clever marketing? The truth is, there's no significant nutritional difference between brown and white eggs. The color of an eggshell is determined by the breed of the hen that lays it, not by its nutritional value. Brown eggs and white eggs have nearly identical amounts of protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals. So where did this myth come from? It likely started because brown eggs are often more expensive. Many people assume that a higher price means better quality, but the cost difference has nothing to do with health benefits. Brown eggs typically come from larger breeds of chickens that require more feed, making them more expensive to produce. White eggs, on the other hand, come from breeds that are smaller and more efficient at laying eggs, making them cheaper to produce and sell. There's also a psychological factor at play. Many people associate brown foods with being healthier. Whole wheat over white bread, brown rice over white rice. So it's easy to assume the same applies to eggs. But in reality, both types of eggs provide the same essential nutrients, including high-quality protein, healthy fats, and important vitamins like B12 and D. Of course, there are some differences between eggs, but they have nothing to do with color. Factors like the hen's diet, living conditions, and overall health impact the egg's nutritional profile more than the shell color ever could. Free-range or pasture-raised chickens often produce eggs with higher omega-3 content and richer yolks, but both brown and white eggs can come from these sources. So why does this myth persist? Probably because marketing has reinforced the idea that brown eggs are more natural or superior. Since they cost more, people assume they must be better, even though the difference is purely cosmetic. So, are brown eggs healthier than white eggs? Not at all. The next time someone insists that brown eggs are better, you'll know the truth. Shell color is just a matter of genetics, and when it comes to nutrition, an egg is an egg, no matter what color it is. What if everything you thought about houseplants was wrong? You've probably heard the claim, houseplants purify the air in your home. It's a comforting idea. The thought that a few potted plants could act as natural air filters, removing toxins and improving indoor air quality, makes them seem like more than just decorations. But what if that's not the full story? The truth is, while plants can absorb certain pollutants, their impact on indoor air quality is so small that it's practically insignificant. The belief that houseplants act as powerful air purifiers comes from a 1989 NASA study. But what most people don't realize is that this research was conducted under completely unrealistic conditions. So where did this myth come from? The NASA study found that plants could remove toxins like formaldehyde and benzene from sealed chambers in a laboratory. Certain plants did reduce airborne pollutants, but there's one major problem. Real homes are nothing like the small controlled test chambers used in the study. In a typical home, Air is constantly circulating, moving in and out through windows, doors, HVAC systems, and ventilation system. The tiny effect that plants do have gets completely diluted in a real-world environment. To make a measurable difference in air quality, you wouldn't need just a few houseplants. You'd need hundreds, possibly even thousands, packed into every room. And even then, they wouldn't be nearly as effective as something as simple as opening a window or using an air purifier. Of course, this doesn't mean houseplants are useless. They offer plenty of benefits, just not the ones most people think. Plants can boost mood, reduce stress, and improve mental well-being. They can also slightly increase humidity, which might help in dry indoor environments. But if you're hoping they'll clean the air in any meaningful way, you're out of luck. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it's appealing. People like the idea of a natural, effortless way to improve indoor air quality. The idea that a few potted plants could replace expensive air purifiers sounds great, even if it's not true. Plus, plant sellers and home decor enthusiasts have every reason to keep the belief alive. It makes plants even more desirable. So, do houseplants purify the air in your home? Not in any way that matters. The next time someone tells you to buy plants to clean your air, you'll know the truth. They look great, they feel great, but when it comes to air purification, they're no match for ventilation and modern air filters. What if everything you thought about glass was wrong? You've probably heard the claim, glass is a slow-moving liquid. It sounds fascinating, especially when people point to the wavy, distorted panes of glass in old buildings as proof that it has been flowing over time. But what if that's not the truth at all? The reality is glass is not a liquid, it's an amorphous solid. That means it doesn't flow or change shape over time, no matter how many centuries pass. The myth that glass behaves like a supercooled liquid comes from a misunderstanding of both science and history. So where did this idea come from? One reason is the appearance of antique glass windows. In many old buildings, the glass in windows looks thicker at the bottom, leading people to believe that gravity has slowly pulled it downward over time. But this has nothing to do with glass flowing, it's actually due to the way glass was made in the past. Before modern glass manufacturing techniques, glass was produced using methods like a crown glass and a cylinder glass blowing. These processes often resulted in uneven thicknesses, and when the glass was installed in windows, builders frequently placed a thicker side at the bottom for stability, stability. The distortion isn't proof of glass flowing, it's just a quirk of historical production techniques. If glass were truly a slow-moving liquid, we would see modern glass objects like bottles and windows gradually deform over time. But that doesn't happen. Even glass that has existed for thousands of years, such as ancient Egyptian artifacts, remains in its original shape. Scientists have measured the molecular structure of glass, and it shows no signs of movement, even on a microscopic level. So why does this myth persist? Probably because glass does have some properties that make it seem unusual. Unlike crystalline solids, which have an orderly atomic structure, glass has a disordered structure, similar to a liquid. However, this doesn't mean it behaves like one. Once it's cooled and hardened, it remains solid, with no measurable flow, even over millions of years. Of course, glass can be reshaped, but only when heated to extreme temperatures. At high enough heat, it softens and becomes moldable again. But at room temperature, it behaves just like any other solid material. So, is glass a slow-moving liquid? Not at all. The next time someone points to old, wavy windows as proof, you'll know the truth. Glass is a solid, and any warping you see has nothing to do with time. It's just a relic of how glass was made in the past. What if everything you thought about carrots was wrong? You've probably heard the claim eating carrots improves your night vision. It sounds reasonable. Carrots contain vitamin A, and vitamin A is essential for eye health. But what if this idea was never really about nutrition at all? The truth is, while carrots do support eye health, they won't give you superhuman night vision. This myth actually started as a wartime deception, a clever piece of propaganda designed to mislead enemy forces. So where did this idea come from? During World War II, the British Royal Air Force introduced a revolutionary new radar system that allowed them to detect enemy planes at night with unprecedented accuracy. But instead of revealing their secret technology, they spread a false story. British pilots had exceptional night vision because they ate a lot of carrots. The story spread like wildfire, and soon people everywhere believed that a steady diet of carrots could help them see in the dark. The truth is, vitamin A found in carrots is important for maintaining healthy vision. It helps produce a pigment called rhodopsin, which allows the eye to see in low light. A deficiency in vitamin A can lead to poor night vision, but getting extra vitamin A beyond what your body needs won't make your vision any better. Your body can only use so much, and any excess won't improve your eyesight. If carrots really gave people better night vision, you'd expect those who eat a lot of them to have significantly better eyesight in the dark. But that's not the case. No amount of carrots will let you see in complete darkness or give you an advantage over someone with a normal balanced diet. Of course, carrots are good for you. They're packed with antioxidants and essential nutrients that contribute to overall health. But if you're hoping they'll turn you into a night vision expert, you're out of luck. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it's been repeated for generations. Parents tell their kids to eat their carrots, and the idea sticks. Plus, the story of WW2 pilots using carrots for night vision is just fascinating enough to keep the myth alive. So, do carrots improve your night vision? Not in any way that matters. The next time someone tells you to eat more carrots so you can see better in the dark, you'll know the truth. They're healthy, but they won't give you superpowers. What if everything you thought about blood was wrong? You've probably heard the claim deoxygenated blood is blue. It seems to make sense. But what if that's not the truth at all? The reality is human blood is never blue. No matter how much or little oxygen it carries, blood is always some shade of red. The idea that deoxygenated blood turns blue is a complete myth based on a mix of optical illusions and misleading diagrams. So where did this myth come from? One reason is the way veins appear beneath the skin. Many veins look blue, which seems to suggest that the blood inside them is blue. But that's just an illusion. The color we perceive depends on how light interacts with our skin. When light penetrates the skin, different wavelengths are absorbed at different depths. Red light is absorbed more, while blue light is reflected back, making veins appear blue, even though the blood inside is still red. Another major source of confusion is medical illustrations. Many anatomy textbooks use blue to represent deoxygenated blood and red to represent oxygenated blood. While this makes diagrams easier to read, it has led to the widespread belief that blood actually changes color inside the body. In reality, oxygen-rich blood is bright red, and oxygen-poor blood is a darker, deeper red, but never blue. But what about blood in other animals? Some creatures like horseshoe crabs and certain mollusks actually do have blue blood. This is because their blood contains hemocyanin, a copper-based molecule that turns blue when exposed to oxygen. Humans, however, use hemoglobin, an iron-based molecule that turns red when oxygen binds to it. That's why our blood stays red, whether it's rich in oxygen or not. If human blood were truly blue before reaching the lungs, we'd see it during surgeries or injuries involving veins. But that never happens. Even when a deep vein is cut, the blood that comes out is dark red, not blue. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it's been taught for so long. People see blue veins, blue blood in diagrams, and assume it must be true. The next time someone tells you that blood turns blue without oxygen, you'll know the truth. It's always red, whether it's bright red with oxygen or dark red without. What if everything you thought about sneezing was wrong? You've probably heard the claim. If you sneeze with your eyes open, they'll pop out. It sounds dramatic, almost like something out of a cartoon. After all, sneezing generates a lot of pressure, and if your eyes aren't shut, what's stopping them from flying right out of their sockets? But what if this idea was never true at all? The reality is, no matter how hard you sneeze, your eyes won't pop out of your head. This myth likely comes from a misunderstanding of how sneezing and eye anatomy actually work. So where did this idea come from? One reason is the sheer force of a sneeze. A single sneeze can travel at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, expelling air, mucus, and irritants from the nose with a sudden burst of energy. It feels powerful, almost uncontrollable, which makes the idea of eyes popping out seem somewhat believable. But the truth is, the structures that hold your eyes in place are far stronger than any sneeze. Your eyeballs are securely attached to muscles, connective tissues, and the optic nerve, which extends deep into your skull. They're not just sitting loosely in their sockets, waiting to be ejected at the first sign of pressure. Even if you tried to force your eyes open while sneezing, the pressure inside your head wouldn't be nearly enough to dislodge them. Another reason this myth persists is the natural reflex that makes us close our eyes when we sneeze. This involuntary action is controlled by the trigeminal nerve, which links the eyes and nose. When a sneeze is triggered, the nerve response causes the eyes to close automatically. But this reflex has nothing to do with preventing your eyes from popping out. It's just a natural bodily reaction. But what if you do manage to sneeze with your eyes open? Some people can do it, though it takes effort. And yet no cases exist of someone's eyes actually being forced out because of a sneeze. Even in extreme medical conditions where the eye is already loose due to injury or surgery, a sneeze alone isn't powerful enough to push it out of its socket. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it sounds just creepy enough to stick. The thought of sneezing and suddenly losing an eyeball is a vivid, memorable image, even if it's completely false. It's also a myth that has been exaggerated in cartoons and movies. So can sneezing with your eyes open make them pop out? Not at all. The next time someone warns you about keeping your eyes open while sneezing, you can tell them the truth. Your eyeballs are staying exactly where they are, no matter how hard you sneeze. What if everything you thought about late night ice cream was wrong? You've probably heard the claim, eating ice cream before bed gives you nightmares. It sounds plausible. After all, people say that what you eat before sleeping. But what if this idea was never based on science at all? The reality is there's no solid evidence that ice cream, or any specific food, directly causes nightmares. This myth likely comes from a combination of personal experiences, sleep studies, and good old-fashioned superstition. So where did this idea come from? One reason is the connection between food and sleep quality. Ice cream is loaded with sugar and fat, which can affect digestion and metabolism. Eating heavy foods late at night can make sleep more restless, leading to more frequent awakenings. If you wake up in the middle of a vivid or unsettling dream, you might be more likely to remember it and blame it on that late night snack. There's also the idea that certain foods can influence brain activity while you sleep. Some small studies have suggested that spicy foods, dairy, or high sugar foods could make dreams more intense. This is likely because they increase metabolism and body temperature, which could slightly impact sleep cycles. But while ice cream might make dreams more vivid, there's no proof it specifically causes nightmares. Another reason this myth sticks around is how memorable nightmares are. If you eat ice cream before bed and wake up from a bad dream, it's easy to connect the two, even if they're unrelated. But if you eat ice cream and don't have nightmares, you're not as likely to remember that. It's a classic case of confirmation bias. We notice the times the myth seems true, but ignore the times it doesn't happen. But what about studies linking food and dreams? Some research suggests that eating before bed can lead to more dream recall, simply because late-night digestion can disrupt deep sleep. That doesn't mean ice cream specifically causes nightmares, just that eating before bed might make you more likely to wake up and remember your dreams, whether they're good or bad. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it's been repeated for generations. Parents warn their kids about eating sweets before bed, and the idea sticks. Plus, there's something a little spooky about the thought of food controlling our dreams. It's just strange enough to keep the myth alive. So, does eating ice cream before bed really give you nightmares? Not at all. The next time someone tells you to skip the ice cream to avoid bad dreams, you'll know the truth. Your sleep and dreams are influenced by a lot of things, but your favorite frozen dessert isn't one of them. What if everything you thought about earwigs was wrong? You've probably heard the claim earwigs can crawl into your ear and burrow into your brain. To your brain to ear is enough to make your skin crawl. After all, they're called earwigs, right? But what if this terrifying thought was never true? At all was. The reality is, earwigs don't crawl into human ears, and they definitely don't burrow into your brain. This myth is pure fiction, fueled by fear, misunderstanding, and an unfortunate name. So where did this idea come from? One reason is the earwig's appearance. With their long, segmented bodies and menacing pincers, they look like something straight out of a nightmare. But despite their intimidating looks, earwigs are harmless to humans. They don't bite, they don't sting, and they have no interest in burrowing into anything, especially not your brain. Another reason this myth exists is their name. The word earwig comes from Old English, loosely translating to ear creature. This likely comes from an old European superstition that these insects would crawl into people's ears while they slept. There's no scientific evidence to support this. It's just an old wives' tale that somehow stuck around for centuries. In reality, earwigs prefer dark, moist places like soil, leaf litter, and under rocks, not human ears. They feed on decaying plant matter and small insects, not brains. While it's technically possible for any small insect to accidentally wander into an ear, it's extremely rare, and if an earwig did find its way inside, it wouldn't dig into your brain, it would just want to get out. But what about reports of insects ending up in people's ears, Desi? It happens occasionally, but earwigs are far from the main culprits. Small flies, moths, and even cockroaches are more likely to accidentally enter an ear because they're attracted to warmth and light. But even when this happens, the insect doesn't stay. It either escapes on its own or is easily removed. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it plays on a deeply ingrained fear. The idea of losing control over our own bodies. The thought of something crawling into an ear, a place we can't easily see or protect, triggers a natural sense of unease. Plus, the idea has been reinforced in movies, TV shows, and horror stories for years, making it feel more real than it actually is. So do earwigs crawl into human ears and burrow into the brain? Not at all. The next time someone warns you about earwigs invading your head, you can tell them the truth. These misunderstood insects have no interest in you. What if everything you thought about alcohol and warmth was wrong? You've probably heard the claim, drinking alcohol warms you up in cold weather. It seems to make sense. A few sips of whiskey and suddenly you feel a rush of heat spreading through your body. But what if this warmth was nothing more than an illusion? The reality is, alcohol doesn't actually warm you up. It does the exact opposite. It makes you lose heat faster, putting you at even greater risk of hypothermia. So where does this myth come from? One reason is the way alcohol affects your blood vessels. When you drink, alcohol causes blood vessels near the surface of your skin to dilate. This increased blood flow makes your skin feel warm, and for a brief moment, you might even start to sweat. But while you feel warmer, you're actually losing heat. That extra blood near the surface radiates warmth away from your core, dropping your internal body temperature. Another reason this myth persists is how alcohol interacts with our senses. That flush of warmth feels comforting, especially in freezing temperatures, but it's misleading. Normally, your body conserves heat in the cold by constricting blood vessels, keeping warm blood closer to your vital organs. Alcohol disrupts this process, tricking your body into acting like it's warm when it's really cooling down. But what about stories of people surviving extreme cold by drinking alcohol? These tales are misleading. In reality, alcohol impairs your body's natural defense mechanisms. It reduces shivering, which is your body's way of generating heat, and it numbs your awareness of the cold, making you less likely to seek warmth when you need it most. That's why intoxicated individuals are more likely to suffer from frostbite or hypothermia in freezing conditions. There's also the cultural factor. Many cold weather regions have long traditions of drinking alcohol to keep warm. Hot toddies, mulled wine, and spiked coffee are popular winter drinks, reinforcing the idea that alcohol is a cold weather remedy. But just because something feels warm doesn't mean it is warm. That comforting sensation is just a temporary trick played by your circulatory system. So why does this myth persist? Probably because it feels true. The warmth is real, but fleeting. It's easy to mistake that initial sensation for actual body heat, even though the long-term effects are dangerous. So, does alcohol warm you up in the cold? Not at all. The next time someone hands you a drink and tells you it'll keep you warm, you'll know the truth. Alcohol makes you feel warm while it quietly steals your body heat. And in freezing temperatures, that's a risk you don't want to take. When you think of dinosaurs, you probably imagine ancient beasts roaming the earth millions of years ago, terrifying, enormous, and long gone before humans ever arrived. That's the story we're taught. Dinosaurs ruled, then vanished, and humans showed up much later. It sounds clean, simple, but it's not the full story. And the truth is far more surprising, because not all dinosaurs went extinct. Some of them are still alive. In fact, you probably see them every day. You might have even eaten one for lunch. Sounds ridiculous? It's not. The creatures we call birds today are actually direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs, the same group that includes the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex and the fast, agile velociraptor. In evolutionary terms, birds are dinosaurs, not just related to them, not just similar. They are dinosaurs. The misconception that all dinosaurs were wiped out before humans existed is rooted in the mass extinction that happened around 66 million years ago, triggered by a giant asteroid impact. It was devastating. Around 75% of all species on Earth were wiped out. But not everything died. As me as Deoxygenated boobier survived. Some small feathered dinosaurs, ancestors of modern birds, survived. They adapted, they evolved, and they thrived. Over millions of years, they gave rise to the incredible variety of birds we see today. So technically, humans and dinosaurs didn't miss each other completely. We coexist. Every pigeon, hawk, and chicken is a living remnant of a lineage that once ruled the planet. It's a twist in the story that most people never hear because the word dinosaur has been frozen in time, locked to images of massive reptiles crashing through ancient forests. But evolution doesn't care about our mental categories. It keeps going. It doesn't erase the past, it builds on it. And when scientists say non-avian dinosaurs, they're drawing that line more clearly, referring specifically to the ones that didn't make it, the classic ones, the extinct ones. But avian dinosaurs, birds, are still here, flying above us, nesting in our trees, walking in our backyards. And yet, school textbooks often draw a hard line between the age of dinosaurs and the age of mammals, as if evolution operates in chapters with clear endings. It doesn't. Life is messy, transitions are gradual, and survival is often stranger than fiction. This idea changes how we see the world. It makes you rethink what extinction really means. The dinosaurs didn't all disappear in a blaze of cosmic fire. Some slipped through the cracks, some kept going, and some are perched outside your window right now, chirping, looking at you with eyes that carry the legacy of an age long gone. The next time someone says dinosaurs are extinct, remember, they're not entirely wrong, but they're not entirely right either. The dinosaurs that couldn't adapt are gone, but the ones that could, they're still with us, just smaller, lighter, covered in feathers, and they're watching from the trees.